Story 1. My parents reconciled 8 years after their divorce, but my sister was planning to ruin their second wedding. My parents, Mom, 54F, and Dad, 56M, got divorced when my sister and I were in our late teens. I was 19 and my sister was 17, so it was really strange for us to deal with it. My parents had started growing apart when we were around 10 years old, but they'd stayed together for our sake. When they believed they'd done a decent job of raising us and that we would be fine even if they got divorced, they decided to go through with it. Now, it wasn't like we grew up in a toxic household where they would fight every day or anything of the sort, but there was just no romance. They'd be nice to each other and hardly even fought more than a regular couple would. But that was it. The divorce didn't come as a shock to us, but it sure felt weird since we'd known that this was going to happen someday. But now it actually was happening. My sister wasn't happy about it at all and threw a tantrum when we were told, saying that they'd stayed together for so long, so they definitely could be with each other for the rest of their lives. My parents tried to calm her down, but she just refused to listen to either of them. Of course, they still went through with the divorce, but that led to a lot of bitterness in the relationship they had with my sister. I personally don't know who was right or who was wrong, but all I know is that my parents never let me or my sister feel unloved or unimportant to them. So if they wanted to lead separate lives after we were grown up, then that's the very least I could support them in. After the divorce, my dad moved out in a joint custody of my sister. I was in college at the time, so I'd live on campus, and my sister had chosen to live with Mom and would visit Dad on the weekends. Years passed, and our parents still did everything that parents were supposed to do. Paid off our college tuition, bought my sister her first car, paid for my wedding dress and all that. But my sister was never really able to forgive any of them, I think. So anyway, now I'm 27 and she's 25, and I think we're both emotionally mature enough to at least try to understand why our parents did what they did. They've had quite a few relationships over these past 8 years, but none of them have ever lasted and have fizzled out before the 1-year mark. Last year, though, we got to know from a friend of my mother's that she'd been out on a date at a really expensive restaurant with none other than my dad. My sister and I were kind of stunned to learn that our parents had decided to reconnect 8 years after their divorce, and while it did feel kind of weird, I was also really excited for them. I wish I could say the same for my sister, though, since she just seemed annoyed by this piece of information. 3 weeks after that, our parents themselves confessed to us that they'd been seeing each other again and were trying to make things work. I was thrilled for them, and now, almost a year later, they're getting married again. They got engaged last week, and it was so beautiful. I actually helped my dad plan it. He'd asked my sister as well, but she said that she was busy with work, so she'd be a no-show. She didn't attend the engagement party as well, and I know my parents are trying to be understanding and hide their disappointment, but I can just tell how hurt they are by my sister's absence. A few days ago, I called her up to try and persuade her to meet Mom and Dad, but she totally snapped at me on the call and said a lot of unforgivable things about our parents. She said that the way they treated us like an experiment all our lives and now were doing it to us again, that they had no regard for the emotional impact that something like this could have on a kid, and accused them of messing with our heads just for fun. I could understand where she was coming from, but honestly, I could also empathize with my parents, so I don't think either of them was wrong. They weren't wrong for what they did, and my sister wasn't wrong for how she reacted. But then she said that we must try to break them up right away because it'd be too weird and embarrassing to have our parents get married in their mid-50s. Now that really threw me off because as far as I knew, people were overjoyed to know that my parents were getting remarried to each other once more, and not one person had said a word about it being absurd or weird because it wasn't any of those things. It was a celebration of their love for one another, and it was beautiful. She even confessed that she'd been trying to get in contact with their exes that they'd been with in the past 8 years so that she could dig up some dirt on them and create a rift between the two so they don't go through with this embarrassing second wedding. I was horrified that my own sister would say something like this, let alone even try to act on it. I hung up without even saying a word because I was speechless after what she'd said. I mean, not agreeing with your parents' life choices is fine, but trying to sabotage them? That's just low. And I had no idea how to react to that. I tried to make myself believe that she must have been joking, but her tone, the context, and the way she sounded so deranged all made it seem otherwise. I tried to sleep it off that night, but even my husband could sense that something was really off. So around midnight, While I was still tossing and turning, he asked me what my sister had said, and if that's what was making me so uncomfortable. I ended up spilling my guts to him and told him all about what my sister had been suggesting and how she didn't even sound sorry about what she was trying to do. My husband reassured me that I was totally right for freaking out over something like this and suggested that I tell my parents about what she said so that I can keep my conscience clear. I'd wanted to wait till the next day, but I just could not sleep if I didn't tell them immediately. So at around 1 in the morning, I called my mother up and told her everything. I was on speaker so both my mom and dad could hear what I said, and after I was done, they just thanked me for telling them. They seemed upset and resigned, and even apologized to me if the way they'd raised us had seemed unorthodox or emotionally draining like my sister had said, and told me that they were just trying to be good parents to us, but clearly they had failed. Obviously, I told them that they hadn't failed in the least and I could attest to that. Maybe my sister needed time to come around, but I didn't think of them as the villains here, and they needed to know that so they wouldn't be so hard on themselves. It was an emotional moment for the three of us, and deep down, we all wished we could share it with my sister, but she'd made it abundantly clear that she wanted no part of this. Anyway, after filling them in on what my sister had been planning, I could finally relax a bit and go to sleep. The next morning, I woke up to an angry phone call from my sister accusing me of trying to turn our parents against her. She called me a tattletale and said that she regretted trusting me in the first place. I was still groggy since I'd just woken up and had practically forgotten the events of last night, so I was really confused. It was only when she mentioned in her rant that our parents had called her up today and told her that she was no longer invited to their wedding unless she learned to be happy for them that I remembered what she was talking about. I was pretty annoyed to be woken up on my day off so early, and I told her that if she couldn't handle being told off by her parents, then maybe she shouldn't have planned to break them up in the first place. I told her that I did the right thing by warning them about what she wanted to do and said that if she's so pissed off about her parents actually being happy, then they're right, maybe she should just stay away instead. After that, I hung up and went back to sleep. I'd muted all notifications as well so that she wouldn't bother me. An hour later, when I finally did wake up, I found at least 50 texts and 10 missed calls from my sister. She was outraged that I dared to hang up on her in the middle of her rant and accused me of trying to actively meddle in her relationship with our parents and making her look like the bad guy while I, as usual, am the golden child. Not just that, but she also said that this was me trying to make sure that she gets cut out of their lives and I walk away with the inheritance alone. That ticked me off because, first of all, I'm not that greedy, and I won't stoop so low for the inheritance, and more importantly, I'm not the kind of person to create animosity between my parents and my sister for something so petty. I couldn't even believe that she would suggest something like that and decided that I wouldn't even dignify anything that she said with a response. But my silence didn't stop her from continuously texting me either, and by the evening, she was demanding that I apologize to her publicly. I don't even know what made her think I was going to apologize in the first place, let alone publicly. I hadn't said or done anything out of line as far as I was concerned and only tried to prevent any unnecessary drama from messing with my parents' happiness. And I would do so again gladly, even if it meant going against my own sister, especially if she was in the wrong here. It's been 2 days since then, and while she's been texting me less often, she's still doing it and trying to make me feel guilty for telling on her. This morning, I finally gave up because I couldn't take the relentless accusations anymore, so I finally answered her call and told her that if she was actually delusional enough to expect that I was going to apologize in front of our family, then that was not my problem and she needed to grow the hell up. But she wasn't one to give up so easily and kept arguing with me, saying that if I'd thought that what she was saying was messed up, then I should have confronted her instead of going behind her back to tell on her like we were in kindergarten or something. Once again, she said that I was just trying to impress our parents and show off how great I was while showing her in a bad light. I told her that I'd talk to her once I was back from work and that she needed to leave me alone for a bit. Now she hasn't texted me anymore, but she did say that she was disappointed that I, in spite of claiming to understand her, went behind her back. Still, I'm obviously feeling guilty now, and I guess maybe she does have a point. Am I the jerk for telling my parents that my sister wanted to sabotage their relationship somehow? Update 1. I read the responses and I guess I didn't really need to apologize to her. I don't know how to deal with the situation now though. My sister hasn't spoken to me since the last update, and it's been a day now, so I'm guessing that's that then. She's probably just as uninterested in dragging this out as I am and doesn't want to create any more of a fuss than she's already done. So I think it's best for us to brush this under the rug and leave it be. I did speak to my parents, though, and they told me that they hadn't even heard from my sister yet. They're scheduled to get married in a few weeks, and I just hope that she apologizes to them before that. I know she won't apologize to me, and honestly, neither am I expecting it. Update 2. Close to a week has passed since I last spoke to my sister, and I definitely do miss her, but it's very obvious that she doesn't. She hasn't reached out to me, and it's not because she doesn't have the time, since I've seen her post pictures of herself partying and hanging out with several other people. What really hurt me was that a couple of days ago, one of our common friends from high school had been visiting and asked her if she'd wanted to meet for brunch, but she'd said that she'd rather meet one-on-one than in my company. That just really sucked, and I don't know if things will ever go back to the way they were, even if she apologizes or heck, even if I apologize to her. I don't know if we can ever go back to being the same way that we used to be. I've been really upset about all of this, and my husband is trying his best to cheer me up. I appreciate his efforts, but he's an only child, so he can't understand how difficult it is for me to suddenly stop speaking to my sister. Regardless of how she feels about our parents, we've always been really close, and I've always tried to ignore it whenever she'd speak badly of them because I knew that neither of them were bad people. This one time that I chose to speak up, it ended up with her completely cutting me off. I can't stand the silent treatment, to be very honest. I think if she doesn't text me in a few days, then I might just reach out to her first. Right or wrong be damned, I just miss my little sister. Update 3. I ended up being the one to reach out first because, like I said, I just couldn't stand the silence anymore. And I don't know if it was the right decision on my part or not, very honestly, but I am glad that I decided to talk to her. I dropped by her house last evening so that we could smooth things out, and she looked really surprised to see me there. It took us a while to get over the awkwardness of the situation, but finally, we did address the problem at hand. I told her that my whole life I've thought of her as my best friend, and I'm sure she felt the same way towards me as well, which is why I was taking this so hard and even bothered to try and fix things with her. I explained that me telling our parents about what she'd said might not have been the best move given the circumstances, but I just wanted to keep my conscience clear. At the same time, I just really didn't want her to do something rash either. In my eyes, neither she nor my parents was in the wrong, so to say. I couldn't just pick sides, and I most certainly wasn't trying to be the golden child or whatever like she'd accused me of trying to be. I was really hurt by the way she dealt with the situation, but I also understood why she'd be hurt by me telling my parents without bothering to speak to her first regarding the whole sabotaging statement, and I truly was sorry about that. And then she explained her side of the story to me. When she was told by our parents that she was no longer welcome to the wedding because they knew what I'd said, she felt incredibly hurt because obviously she realized what she'd been trying to do was totally messed up and wrong. In fact, she'd had that realization as soon as I hung up on her because I never ever do that, even when she pisses me off. I've always taken my time to correct her, so she knew that she must have said something truly horrible if I didn't even bother to reply to it. She'd been planning to call me up the very next morning and tell me that she didn't mean it, since she thought that calling back immediately would make it seem insincere or whatever. But then stuff happened and she started feeling really resentful towards me. I'd heard of rivalry among siblings, but here she told me she felt like she was always competing with her parents to win me over instead. We laughed about that. It was kind of uncomfortable, but she still meant it. She told me that ever since she was a kid, she'd believed that our parents and their relationship confused her, and their divorce left her with mixed feelings about the whole thing. She didn't want to admit it, but she missed us too, but was too proud to actually say it aloud. And now deciding to get married again just made something snap inside of her because she felt she was going back to being a confused little kid again who had no words to actually explain what kind of relationship her parents shared. They were married but weren't in love, and yet they weren't divorced, and she'd always felt hurt that, in spite of not actually hating each other, they just didn't want to be together. Them announcing their divorce was just the last straw for her when she was younger because she felt betrayed somehow, as if their daughters had suddenly just stopped being a good enough reason to stick by each other, and she wasn't sure of how she felt about that whole thing, which is why she distanced herself from the situation altogether. She'd kept all this to herself all these years because, first off, she just didn't know where to begin or who to even talk to. She didn't want to talk to our parents or her friends about it, and she didn't think she could talk to me about it because I just try to take their side and explain why her feelings were invalid. I felt hurt that she'd think that, but then again, she was a teenager and didn't know any better. And now when they'd announced that they were getting married again, it all came rushing back to her. She just wasn't comfortable with this, which is why she'd ended up lashing out, and instead of trying to get to the bottom of her behavior, we just pushed her away even more. Obviously, now that I know what she'd been going through all these years, I understand her behavior, and while we agree that it doesn't just excuse everything, but at least now there's an explanation for the way she behaved. Both of us ended up in tears because of how emotionally relieving that whole conversation had been, and I guess we really did need to get it all off our chests. She's promised me that she'll talk to Mom and Dad pretty soon as well, and I've told her that I'll be there for her when she decides that she feels ready to have this conversation with them as well. Hopefully, it'll be before the wedding because I know how much it'll mean to them if we're both a part of their wedding. Update 4. So 3 days have passed since the last update, and today my sister finally spoke to our parents. It was all prearranged by me, the time, the place, and felt really formal and official initially, like this was a legal discussion. But once we were all in the same room, it just got so much easier and more comfortable. My sister started off by explaining whatever she told me and the things she used to feel as a kid and the fact that their engagement brought all those feelings back up, and she just snapped. And she said that she really was sorry about whatever she said and did. She'd been lashing out because of her own suppressed emotions, and my parents also did their part and told her how sorry they were that she'd ever felt this way. Their only intention was to make us feel safe and raise us together so that we would never feel resentful towards them, which is why they decided to stay together. But they'd never imagined that it would end up confusing and hurting my sister so much. They just assumed that since I never had an issue with their arrangement, she wouldn't either. But they realize now that different kids cope with situations differently, and there's nothing wrong with that. They decided that they'd probably try therapy since they sincerely wanted to build a better relationship with each other and truly try to understand what they all felt so they don't inadvertently hurt each other. So that was really nice. As for me, well, my sister and I are back on good terms again, and now that all the parental issues are slowly but surely being worked out, our bond is stronger than ever, and I couldn't be happier about it. Our parents are getting married next week, and we're both flower girls, which is a bit quirky, but we're so on board with it, and I feel like my family is finally coming together, something that I've wanted for so long. I'm finally happy. Update 5. They got married finally. It's really late at night right now, but I don't even care. I just want to share my happiness. My sister and I being the flower girls was probably the highlight of the wedding, and everyone had a good chuckle at that. Let me just get that out of the way. But my sister's speech just takes the cake. I don't know how or where she learned to write so well, but the way she'd penned down her emotions was just beautiful, and there wasn't a single dry eye present. We literally sang and danced the night away, and by the time we came home, my husband was complaining about how his feet probably wouldn't stop hurting for a month, so you guys can probably imagine how much fun it was. My sister and I wanted to make it memorable for our parents. We wanted to surprise them with a wedding gift, and what could be better than an all-expenses-paid trip to Italy? My mom almost passed out because she'd always wanted a honeymoon in Italy, but they'd just been too busy taking care of us, and now it was time to return the favor and let us take care of them. They were obviously thrilled about it, and so were we. I'm just so happy that I could actually start floating right now. Now on to the next story. Story 2. Sil offered to watch my son for a day when I got sick. Then my niece called me in tears because her mom fed my son peanut butter, knowing about his allergy. I, F32, don't really have a very good relationship with my husband, J, M33, and his family. We've been married for 6 years now and have a 4-year-old son, Egan. Yes, we are Game of Thrones fans. Please don't come for me in the comments. My in-laws don't really like me because I'm not from the same culture as them. They are quite religious, but I lean towards agnostic, and they think that I am the reason why Jay has moved away from his faith. That is the farthest thing from the truth. He made those decisions himself long before he even met me, so I don't know where all the worry is coming from. Anyway, they have some preconceived notions about me, and though we are cordial now, we are certainly not close. After Egan was born, things smoothed out a lot between my MIL and me. She used to come over more, and as we talked to each other, we were able to understand each other's perspectives better, which helped ease things out a lot. My FIL is mostly unbothered about all the family drama, and he treats me with respect and doesn't interfere or meddle in our affairs, which is all I want. So, things on that front are okay too. Moreover, both of them dote on Aegean, and he loves spending time with them. So yeah, even though things were a little icy in the beginning, it is much better now, and I can see how much this means to Jay because he has always been close to his parents, even though they don't believe in the same things anymore. The problem is my SIL. She's Jay's sister, Joanna, F40, and she has a 5-year-old daughter, Rachel. Joanna's husband left her 2 years ago because she was caught having an affair with his best friend. It was a mess altogether, and he fought tooth and nail to get Rachel's custody, but he only gets her on the weekends. That was a horrible time for the family, and though neither Jay nor I condone what Joanna did, we still knew we had to stand with her because we're family. It was during this time that I offered to keep Rachel with me while Joanna sorted out her stuff. It wasn't a big deal for me, honestly, because Aegean was approximately the same age, and having a cousin to play with would be better for both of them. So Joanna used to drop Rachel at my place in the morning, go sort out her court stuff, look for places to rent, jobs, etc., and then pick her up from my place in the evening. This went on for about a month, and both Rachel and Aegean got used to each other's company. Naturally, when she took Rachel with her full-time, Rachel was very upset, and Joanna took it as a slight to herself. She started feeling that Rachel preferred me over her, which was just not the case. She's a little kid, and she doesn't think that way. I told Joanna repeatedly that Rachel liked playing with Aegean, which is why she liked my place more than theirs, and if an arrangement could be made to have them play together, the problem would resolve itself. I knew Joanna was but hurt about this, and I don't really blame her. Her emotions were all over the place even though she was the one that was cheating. Things got sour between us because she accused me of trying to steal her daughter, and that was when Jay had had enough. He told her that she should be thankful to us because we were helping her stinking, cheating ass, but on the contrary, she was the one pulling an attitude with us. She went low contact with us, and it just hurt me a lot because the kids were suffering because of her. What she didn't know was that her ex-husband, Nal, used to bring Rachel to our place during the weekend so she would get to see Aegean. He had sworn Rachel to secrecy, but all of us knew it was only a matter of time before she spilled the beans. She was just 3 at the time, and she would eventually have told her mother, but all of us thought that it was worth the risk. When the big reveal finally happened, there was a lot of drama, and MIL and FIL had to intervene and asked her to stop being thick and think about her daughter instead. It took some convincing before she could finally see our side of things and agreed to have Rachel and Aegean play together. The thing is that the kids absolutely adore each other. They're like siblings, and since they're so close in age, they gel really well together. It's honestly a delight watching them, especially since Jay and I had decided that we would have only one child, and I had always felt that not having a sibling is sad for a kid. But here, we kind of have the best of both worlds. The kids took turns at each other's places. There were times Rachel came over, and other times Aegean went to Joanna or even Nal, and most of the time they were at MIL and FIL's place. Things were okay, and never once did I suspect that Joanna was harboring such resentment against me for all these years. Had I known, I would have put Aegean's safety first, and now I can't help but think that I have failed as a mother. For the last 2 years, things have been more or less fine with Joanna. The kids get along, and that's what matters to me, so there's that. But all of this changed yesterday. Jay has been out of town for a week because of work. It's just me and Aegean at home, and even MIL and FIL are on vacation. I suddenly fell really sick 2 days ago. I was running a temperature and feeling nauseous. It wasn't anything serious, but I still felt quite weak. I called a friend over and she helped me out. It was Rachel's turn to come home yesterday, but I didn't even have the energy to deal with one kid, let alone 2. So I called up Joanna and asked her to cancel and told her that I was quite sick. She kindly offered to take Aegean for the day so that I could rest and recuperate. I thanked her profusely because he would get his day out with Rachel, and I'd get some time to sleep and rest. We finalized the plan, and Joanna said she would pick Aegean up and take both him and Rachel to the adventure park in town, and after that they could also have a sleepover at her place. This would tire them out completely, and they could enjoy it, whereas I could get a full day to myself. I was very grateful for her gesture because she has very rarely shown me this kindness. I could never have guessed that something was amiss. I thought that she genuinely felt sorry for me in my sickness, which is why she offered to help. The next day, which was yesterday, she came around noon and took Ejin with her. I told her to keep giving me updates once in a while, and she told me that I had nothing to worry about and that he would be fine. The minute he went out the door, I simply crashed on the bed. I was still running a temperature, and I needed sleep. Plus, I knew Ejin was safe and nothing would happen. He was with his aunt. What could even go wrong? So I had no stress or anxiety keeping me up. I don't know when I fell asleep, but at 2:05 p.m., I got a call from Joanna's number. It was actually the call that woke me up, and when I checked my phone later, I realized that she had called me once before, but I had slept through it. When I answered, I could hear someone crying on the other side, and I just froze. It was Rachel. She was crying and telling me that Ejin was sick. She told me to come to the adventure park fast. I got up from my bed, even though my body was aching, and rushed to the park. When I got there, I found Ejin lying on the floor, barely conscious. He had hives all across his body, and his face and eyes were swollen. I rushed him to the emergency room and was fuming all the way through. I wanted to slap the crap out of Joanna, but I knew that getting him to the hospital and caring for him right now had to be my priority and that she could be dealt with later. The doctors asked me if he had any allergies that could have brought about the reaction, and I said that he had always had a nut allergy and everyone was careful about it. He asked me if he had accidentally eaten something containing nuts, but I said that he wasn't with me, and I brought Joanna. Joanna denied that he had eaten anything that had nuts in it. The doctor looked at us weirdly and said that he would keep him under observation for a while and that Ejin had to be monitored. This was when Rachel burst into tears and said that Mommy gave him my peanut butter sandwich even when I told her that he couldn't eat it. I saw red. I flung at Joanna and slapped her right there in the hospital in front of everyone. She tried lunging back at me, but the nurses restrained her, and the doctor rushed to check on Ejin. Joanna tried to yank Rachel away, but Rachel was sobbing uncontrollably and was latched onto my leg as though her life depended on it. I felt so bad for the girl, and I knew if she went back with her mother right now, Joanna would rip her apart. I called up Nal and told him that Rachel was safe but he needed to come to the hospital. I wanted the right parent to be there with Rachel. Joanna was protesting and trying to create a scene, but when the nurses told her that if she kept up her behavior she would be escorted out, she shut up. Nal came, and Rachel ran to him and hugged him. He looked at both Joanna and me and realized that something major was up. It had been a couple of hours in the hospital by then, and Ejin was fine. They said that the allergic reaction had been controlled, but that as family, it was everyone's duty to be more careful about what he was eating. The doctor said that they would keep him overnight for supervision and that he would be discharged the next day. Nal offered to drive me home, but I said that I needed to talk about what happened, and I needed both Joanna and Rachel there, which meant that he had to be there as well. We went to a dine-in to grab a bite, and what Joanna told me just made me lose my crap all over again. I had composed myself a little in all those hours, but listening to that talk made my blood boil. I first asked Rachel what happened. She looked nervously at her mom, who was glaring at her. Nal stepped in and said that she needed to be honest about everything and not worry because he would protect her and that she needed to do the right thing. She was still very nervous, and while Nal was coaxing her into telling us the truth, Joanna was trying to create a ruckus, saying things like we were bullying her daughter and that she would not stand for it. I told her to shut up and let the girl speak and that her intimidation tactics wouldn't work anymore. It took some time, but Rachel finally told us what happened. She said that Joanna had given them money to buy sandwiches from the sandwich stall. Rachel bought a peanut butter sandwich, whereas Ejin bought a mixed fruit jam sandwich. While they were on their way back, Ejin asked Rachel if he could have a bite, but she said no because he wasn't allowed to eat peanut butter. Everyone in the family knows about Ejin's nut allergy, even him, so I'm surprised that he asked her for the sandwich, and I'm glad Rachel had the sense not to give it to him. She said he didn't make a fuss but looked a little down because he didn't get to eat the sandwich. When they got back to where Joanna was, why the hell wasn't she with two tiny kids in the first place is beyond me. Joanna asked Rachel why Ejin was being mopey. Rachel said that he wanted a bite of her sandwich, and Joanna got mad at her. She said that she should be sharing things with her cousin and that she had been taught better, blah, blah. Finally, Rachel said she had to cut in and remind Mom that Ejin couldn't eat peanut butter. But apparently Joanna was having none of it. Then both of them kinda got into a fight, and Rachel tried to resist Joanna's attempt to get her to give him the sandwich. But Joanna called her own daughter a greedy little shit and snatched her sandwich from her. By this time, Rachel said that both Ejin and she were crying, and she said that he would get sick like Annie told us if he ate that sandwich. But Joanna said that this was just a harmless prank and nothing would happen to him. She gave him the sandwich, but by that time Ejin too was in tears and said that he did not want the sandwich and wanted to go back home. But Joanna literally force-fed him the sandwich. Rachel didn't use these exact words, but I know what Joanna was up to. It took every ounce of my strength not to lunge at Joanna and strangle her then and there, but I didn't want to do all this in front of Rachel. The poor girl had had enough for the day. Once she was done, she was in tears again, hugged Noel, and said that she wanted to go with him because, "Mommy scares me." All this while, Joanna was scoffing as if trying to discredit what Rachel was saying. I asked her if she had anything to say in her defense, and she said that she had no need to defend herself from the likes of me. She said that if I chose to believe a 5-year-old over a grown woman, I had to get myself checked because clearly there wasn't a single logical brain cell left in me. I didn't fight with her or press for justification because I was thoroughly exhausted, but I did tell her that if she refused to tell me her side of the story, if there even was one, I would take Rachel's version as the truth and proceed accordingly. She told me that I didn't have the power to do anything, and I just told her to watch out because she might be family, but Ejin comes first for both me and Jay, and while I was being kind to her, she had no idea what Jay would do when I told him. That's where the panic set in. She told me not to involve Jay because Rachel was lying. She then started rambling something about what had happened, but I told her to cut the crap. I had given her a chance to explain, but she blew it, so now she could deal with Jay herself. I walked out and let Noel and her sort their crap out about Rachel together. I felt bad about leaving Rachel behind, but I didn't have it in me to deal with that night. I love the kid a lot, and I am so grateful to her for saving Aegean's life by calling me, and I wish I could just take her away, but she has a father who needs to now step in. On my way back, I called Jay and told him everything. He was so stressed. He said that he was going to come back. I told him that I had it under control and that they would discharge Aegean the next day, but he was adamant. I didn't really stop him because I know he gets worried, and gun to my head, I could have actually used the support. I know Aegean is all better now, and we needn't worry about anything, but I know for sure that I am not letting Joanna get away. She has deliberately endangered my child, and she needs to pay for it. I don't know how she will, but I know that she will. I can never trust her with Aegean again, and at this point, I am even worried for Rachel. She was so petrified of her mother. I can't even imagine what goes on behind closed doors. Update 1. Sorry for the delay in the update. I know a lot of you were asking for it. Honestly, things have been so busy and stressful at home that it never even crossed my mind to check Reddit. Jay came back the next day, and I hugged him so tight I think I displaced some of his organs, lol. Aegean was discharged, and he seemed okay, just tired, so we let him sleep for as long as he wished. I asked Jay if he had spoken to Joanna at all, and he said that there was nothing to talk to her about and that he would never forgive her for doing something like this intentionally. Had it been a mistake, maybe there would have been a chance for forgiveness somewhere along the line, but Jay said that he just could not bring himself to be okay with this or forget it and move on. I asked him what we should be doing. I had initially thought that we could just tell the entire family what she had done, so that there would be some outrage and we would not be questioned on our decision to go no contact with her. But when I proposed this, Jay looked at me like I was crazy. He said that we needed to do much more. He told me that I had to stop thinking about her like family because she didn't think of our son as such, and that she was dangerous. God knows why she willingly put his life in danger. She knew full well that the nut allergy was severe in Aegean's case, and even though her daughter, who was just 5 years old, kept reminding her, she ignored all her pleas and went ahead with this. He said that I needed to look at it for what it was. It wasn't a mistake. It was something that she had done out of pure spite and malice, and God alone knows what else she could do. I knew what he was saying was right, but verbalizing all this made it, more real in a sense. I didn't want to accept the extent to which things had spiraled, but there was nothing else to be done. Joanna was dangerous. She had shown this to us herself, and the only thing we could do was ensure that she didn't endanger anyone else anymore. Most importantly, Rachel. Jay asked me where Rachel was, and I said that Nal had probably taken her for the night. It was the weekend the day Ejin returned, so she would have had a good 3 days with Nal, and maybe by then Joanna would have calmed down so that Rachel didn't have to face the brunt of her mother's wrath. Jay called up Nal and asked him how she was doing, and he said that she was still very shaken up from yesterday and she just refused to go back to mom. Jay told me that this was the best time to call CPS and report her because no child should be this scared of a parent. For a moment, I thought maybe Rachel was scared because her version of the story wasn't the truth. It was a possibility. She was just 5. Maybe there was an unintentional mix-up of the sandwiches on her part, and she was scared that we would scold her. So she put the blame on Joanna, and Joanna played along because she didn't want Ejin and Rachel's playtimes to stop over an innocent, albeit fatal, mistake. I somehow couldn't shake this feeling away, even though no child could lie in such detail. But I just couldn't believe that despite knowing about Ejin's allergies, Joanna would deliberately feed him the sandwich despite being told no. It seemed borderline crazy, and she had never behaved this way before. So we decided to call Nal again, and I asked him whether Joanna had admitted to anything, and he said that she broke down and told him everything. He had secretly recorded the entire conversation, but he told us it was too dark to listen to. We asked him to forward the recording to us nonetheless, and there we could clearly hear Joanna admitting to everything. She said that she didn't know why she did it, but she did. Nal was furious, and he asked her why she didn't go to the emergency herself, and she said that she couldn't afford the bill. He told her that she should be thankful that Rachel called me up because if she hadn't, Ejin would have died. She was sobbing in the recording and kept on saying, "I'm sorry. I'm sorry." But I didn't have a single feeling of sympathy left for her after that. I realized that the stress of the day had actually made me forget the seriousness of the situation, and it's true. If Rachel hadn't been smart or brave enough to call me, Ejin would have died. I owed that kid my son's life, and I knew that I had to do everything in my power to keep her away from that a-hole of a mother and woman. We called CPS and told them everything. We told them that we were worried about Rachel's safety, and that if she was capable of deliberately inducing an allergic reaction in a child, and then not responding accurately because of a purported lack of funds, we didn't know how safe her own kid would be with her. The officer took note of it and asked us what the custody agreement was, and we told them everything. The next Monday, which was 2 days later, the officers were at her place. We knew because she sent a scathing text to us telling us that she knew we were behind this and that she should have killed Ejin when she had the chance. I have blocked her since then, but Jay hasn't. He called her up and gave her a piece of his mind and told her that he would go to the ends of the earth to keep Rachel safe from her because she clearly wasn't mentally stable. MIL and FIL were finally roped in, and we told them everything. At first, they tried to make excuses for Joanna, but when we made them hear the recording, they didn't have anything to say. I don't know what their equation with Joanna is, and neither do I care. But both Jay and I have told them that we want nothing to do with her anymore. We hope that CPS is going to take Rachel away from her, but we can't be sure because there is no neglect or abuse involved in her case. But I know that if she continues to stay with Joanna, she is going to make things horrible for her own daughter. Update 2. CPS has removed Rachel from Joanna's care, and she is now going to live with Nal permanently. The custody agreement had to be officially changed, and Joanna went crazy about it, and now we know why. It wasn't because she would miss Rachel or something. It was because she was using the child support payments to fund her life. The child support was an insane amount, and now she's going to have none. Keeping Rachel with him is going to be better on the pocket for Nal, not that it matters to him anyway. Nal has also been asked to take Rachel to therapy because the poor kid has been having nightmares ever since the Ejin affair. Ejin on his part is doing well. He doesn't even remember much, and when we ask him how his day with Auntie and Rachel was, he just says he had a lot of fun and the best part was the hospital ride at the end. I cannot even fathom why someone would hold so much resentment for a child. MIL has been quite upset over the incident, not Ejin particularly, but the one where a mother lost her child due to our intervention, aka Joanna. I don't understand how she can continue to sympathize with Joanna. FIL for his part is furious, and he says that he initially did not believe that she could be this crazy. He has apologized to us for not believing us, and while it still annoys me, I know that he means well. No father would ever want to know or accept that one child of his was capable of intentionally, fatally harming the other child's kid. So I understand his hesitation about it all. Rachel and Egan still meet up regularly. We didn't want Rachel to think that she did anything wrong, or that she could have done anything more during the day the incident happened. She still blames herself though, and it breaks my heart to see her like that. She even made sorry cards for Adrian, Jay, and me. I think it has to be one of my most prized possessions. I try spending time with her as much as I can. Call me old-fashioned, but I feel that a child needs a maternal figure in his or her life, and Rachel has never had that. Even though Joanna is a mother, I don't think she has the capacity to be maternal. She has proven that with the way she was with Egan. No person capable of pulling something like that off will ever have that innate compassionate instinct. I know a lot of you are going to come at me in the comments for saying this, but it is what it is. We are trying to normalize things for the kids as much as possible, even though nothing is normal anymore. Joanna has been trying to get in touch with Jay and me, Mal told us, but she's blocked everywhere. So that's an unnecessary headache she has taken upon herself. She tries to subtly act as an intermediary, but every attempt of hers has been shot down, and both Jay and I are running on thin ice with her. She either gets it herself or we go no contact with her pretty soon. I can't have her talking about that and trying to get us to be a family again. Update 3. Joanna tried to take Rachel from school. The school already knew about the issues going on, so they were prompt in reaching out to Nal. Rachel is safe, and she just doesn't want to be with her mother at all. Nal is thinking of going for a restraining order, but he's not sure yet because at the end of it all, Joanna is her mother and nothing can change that. It's just a pile of hot mess right now, and I personally would prefer being away from this drama, but I do know that the drama started because I called CPS on her. I personally think that she is not a good parent by far, but I mean now things are getting serious and criminal, which is unsafe for everyone. Who knows what she'll do next? They're trying to resolve this, and if it doesn't get resolved, a restraining order is the only option available. I hope it doesn't come to that, but if it does, I don't think there's anyone to blame except Joanna herself. Now on to the next story. Story 3. Parents used my college fund to pay their debts and forced me to work instead of study, so I cut them off and moved to another state. But they tracked my address and started harassing me. Growing up, I always felt like a burden rather than a child my parents actually wanted. My father, a corporate lawyer in his mid-50s, and my mother, a real estate agent in her early 50s, were far more invested in maintaining their upper-middle-class image than actually being parents. They'd had me relatively young, and it often seemed like my existence was more of an inconvenience to their lifestyle than anything else. In our family, appearances were everything. My parents liked to project this image of success and stability, but behind closed doors, things were very different. While I didn't realize it as a kid, I know now that they treated me less like a daughter and more like an unpaid helper. Any achievements or dreams I had were either ignored or belittled. I'd bring home good grades or get awards only to have them brush it off, saying, "It's not a big deal, you're supposed to do well." Over time, it became clear that my value in their eyes depended on how I could either uphold their image or reduce their burden. But things really escalated when I was in my last year of high school. Out of nowhere, my mom lost her job. She never gave me a clear explanation of what happened, so I still don't know if she was let go or quit voluntarily, but she stopped working entirely. Around the same time, my dad was fired from the law firm he'd been with for years. Losing both incomes, their once perfect life started crumbling. They were struggling to keep up with the mortgage payments, bills, and all the other costs they'd been accustomed to affording easily. Suddenly, all their pent-up frustration, desperation, and financial instability were directed straight at me. I had been working hard in school, balancing my studies with a part-time job, so I could save up for college and contribute to my own expenses. Eventually, I earned a scholarship that would cover most of my tuition, a huge relief given my parents' financial situation. But when I shared the news with them, expecting at least a small sense of pride or encouragement, all I got were questions about how that scholarship money could be useful to the family. My dad started dropping hints that I should stay home, give up the scholarship, and work full-time to help with their financial burdens. My mom even suggested that college could wait and that a real adult would help out their family. The final blow came when I found out that the modest college savings fund my late grandfather had set up for me had been completely drained. They'd used it to pay off some of their own debts without telling me. When I confronted them, they had no apologies, just explanations about how it was necessary to keep our family afloat. I was devastated, and I remember feeling like I'd been cheated out of a future. They had no interest in seeing me achieve it. It became clear that in their eyes, my dreams, my future, and even my well-being were all secondary to their own needs. At that point, I knew I had to leave. So, at 18, I packed up what little I had and moved to a nearby city to attend college on my own. I worked multiple jobs to get by, juggling my studies with waitressing, tutoring, and any other work I could find. It was hard, but being away from them felt like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. There was finally a sense of freedom, even if it meant I had to struggle. I kept my distance, only reaching out on holidays or for obligatory family calls, hoping that maybe the time apart would lead to some kind of change in how they saw me. Fast forward a few years. I finished my degree and received an offer for a full-time job in another state. The job was everything I'd worked for, with a good salary, benefits, and a chance to finally build a stable life. I moved again, this time hundreds of miles away, and started fresh. I felt so free to be able to afford my own apartment, to have friends who cared about me, and to finally live on my own terms. The dream had come true. For the first time, I felt like I was where I was supposed to be. 2 years had passed since that move, and I hadn't heard a word from my parents. I thought they'd finally accepted that I was done catering to their needs, but a week ago, I received a message from them saying they wanted to reconnect and were planning a visit with a special surprise for me. They kept saying that I would be so happy when I got the surprise, and as though nothing had happened, like we were just a normal family that had simply lost touch. Their message left me stunned. Here they were, reaching out after years of silence, pretending as if they hadn't manipulated and controlled me all my life. They were acting like we had some wonderful family bond that could be reignited with a simple visit. They hinted that their surprise would make things right between us, whatever that was supposed to mean. Given our history, I couldn't help but feel suspicious. Every surprise they'd ever had for me was a way to guilt trip or manipulate me. When I politely declined their visit, they didn't take it well. I soon began receiving messages from other family members, all trying to guilt me into changing my mind. They said things like, "Your parents are reaching out because they miss you, and it's time to let the past go." Some even hinted that I was being too harsh and that my parents were only trying to make amends. It felt like everyone had conveniently forgotten all the sacrifices I'd made just to break free from their control. The guilt-tripping continued with messages suggesting that family is family, no matter what, and that everybody deserves a second chance. But after everything I'd been through, did I really owe them another chance? I'd spent years carrying the weight of their mistakes, sacrificing my peace, my savings, and my dreams to help them maintain their perfect image. I had put my own life on hold just to keep them afloat, only to be discarded when they no longer needed me. And now that I'd finally built something for myself, they wanted back in. So here I am, torn between the family I was born into and the life I fought to create on my own. Part of me wonders if I'm wrong for wanting to keep my distance, for finally choosing myself over the people who only saw me as a means to their own ends. I know what my parents are capable of, and I know that this surprise is likely just another way to manipulate me. But I also can't shake the feeling of guilt they've instilled in me, the feeling that maybe I owe them something just because they're my parents. Reddit, am I in the wrong for wanting to be free after everything my parents put me through? Am I wrong for refusing to let them back in when I finally have a chance to live on my own terms? Update 1. First, I want to thank everyone for the outpouring of support, comments, and messages. It's overwhelming in the best way possible to hear from so many people who have been through similar situations and to receive advice from those who understand how hard it can be to set boundaries with family. Reading through all of your experiences has really helped me gain clarity about my own. Many of you pointed out something I'd missed initially, that my parents' whole approach to reconciling, by showing up unannounced and dangling a surprise in front of me, especially a financial one, proves they still don't understand the impact of their behavior. If anything, It seems they still think of me as someone they can control or appease with money instead of addressing the root issues. After posting the main story, things actually escalated on their own. Yesterday morning, I got a call from my aunt, my mother's sister, who has always been more of a bystander than a supporter, but occasionally reaches out to give family advice. She didn't waste any time asking me why I'd refused to let my parents visit her. What was going on? Apparently, my parents had confided in her about their plans, including this surprise. They were so eager to spring on me. According to my aunt, my parents have supposedly been seeing a family therapist for the past year. They told her they'd been reflecting on how they treated me in the past and had come to realize their mistakes. The surprise they'd been planning was, according to my aunt, a trust fund they'd set up in my name using some of their savings as an apology and as a way to make things right. They believed this gesture could mend our relationship and that it would show me they were committed to change. Hearing about the trust fund just confused me. On one hand, the fact that they had saved up to create something they thought would benefit me felt like an acknowledgement of some sort, and part of me wanted to believe they genuinely changed. But then, as I thought more about it, I felt frustrated that their so-called reconciliation plan still revolved around money and grand gestures, the exact things that created the distance between us in the first place. It felt like they were trying to buy my forgiveness rather than work on the relationship through open communication and respect. After hearing my aunt's story, I decided it was time to address this directly. I sat down yesterday evening and wrote a long email to my parents, laying everything out. I thanked them for the effort they claim to have put into therapy and acknowledged that it's a big step if they're really taking responsibility for the way they treated me. But I also explained that surprising me with a visit and using a financial gesture as a means of apology wasn't the right way to start rebuilding our relationship. I told them bluntly that if they were serious about moving forward, it needed to start with respect for my boundaries and a willingness to communicate directly about what happened, not by trying to buy forgiveness. In the email, I was very clear that I wouldn't be accepting any visits or meetings unless we first established some ground rules. I suggested we start with regular phone calls or messages where we could both gradually build trust and discuss past issues in a way that feels safe for me. I explained that rebuilding our relationship would take time and that I needed to see sustained change, not just a one-time gift or gesture. I even mentioned that if their therapy is truly helping, they should know that reconciliation takes work, not just money or big surprises. After hitting send, I felt a huge wave of relief. For the first time in a long time, it felt like I was setting the terms of how this would go. The next morning, I received a response from my parents, and it was a lot. They were polite at first, saying they appreciated my honesty and were open to following my lead if it meant fixing things. But then, as the email went on, it was clear they were already backpedaling. My mother wrote paragraphs about how families shouldn't need rules or formal boundaries and that if I truly wanted to make amends, I should have been more willing to let them visit and talk in person. My father's part was more straightforward. He felt hurt that I rejected their gift, saying it took them a lot of effort and that he felt disrespected by my refusal to accept their attempt at reconciliation. It felt like they were shifting the blame onto me, implying that by setting boundaries, I was the one refusing to reconcile, as if that wasn't enough. My mother also included a line about how I've always been independent to a fault, which stung. I realized then that they hadn't really changed. They were still framing everything as my fault, my inability to be family-oriented or forgiving enough. Reading through it felt like another slap in the face, as if they were ignoring everything I'd shared about my struggles and still twisting it to make me seem ungrateful. Later that evening, I got another call from my aunt. She had clearly spoken to my parents after they'd received my email and was now calling to reason with me, though it felt more like a guilt trip. She kept saying things like, "They're really trying, you know? And it's not easy for them either. And maybe you're being a bit too harsh. They only want to show they've changed." She even mentioned that their therapist had apparently encouraged them to reach out and that their surprise fund was a product of these sessions, as if that somehow justified their entire approach. It felt as though everyone was trying to convince me that accepting their gesture would fix everything when deep down I knew it wouldn't. By the end of the conversation with my aunt, I was exhausted. I was mentally drained from having to explain over and over that a one-time grand gesture isn't a replacement for years of genuine effort or accountability. I kept asking myself why they couldn't just respect what I needed. Why was it so hard for them to communicate with me directly and consistently? All of this felt like more of the same manipulation I'd grown up with, just dressed up in different words and actions. I feel like I'm being pushed into a corner. It's almost as though by setting boundaries, I'm being punished or accused of not trying hard enough to fix things. I never wanted any of this. I never wanted to be forced into playing the role of the ungrateful daughter just because I'm not bending to their version of getting back to how things were. And now, with family members pressuring me to change my stance, I feel like I'm back to square one, trying to defend my choices and my autonomy. After everything I've been through, I know I don't deserve this. I've worked hard to build a life on my own, to be free from the manipulation and control that defined my childhood. Update 2. I truly didn't expect things to escalate as much as they have in the past few days. After sending that last email and being firm about my boundaries, I had hoped that my parents would take a step back and respect my decision. But things have only gotten more complicated, and I'm starting to see just how far they're willing to go to reassert control over me. 2 days after my last post, I woke up to a text from an unknown number. It simply read, "Hope you're doing well in your new city. Don't think you can hide forever. We'll see you soon." My heart stopped. I immediately assumed it was spam or some random scam message, but as I reread it, something about the tone felt too familiar. It was similar to the way my father would leave me reminders or messages when he wanted me to feel guilty or anxious about something. I was trying to brush it off, but it definitely rattled me. Later that day, I received an email from my father. It was a long, formal-sounding message where he said he'd been disappointed by my response and lack of willingness to accept their hand of reconciliation. He didn't outright threaten anything, but the language was pointed. He mentioned how I was their only child and that as their daughter, it was my moral responsibility to show some respect, meet them halfway, and at least consider their attempts to reconcile. There was also a line about how they had invested so much in my education, my upbringing, and that now was not the time to repay them with silence and distance. Reading between the lines, it felt like he was implying that my success and independence were somehow things I owed to them, and it was my duty to keep them close out of gratitude. I was furious, but it also confirmed my fear. They weren't going to respect my space. That evening, I called a close friend who had known me and my family for years. She listened to everything, then calmly reminded me that my parents have always pushed boundaries, and this was probably their way of testing to see how much I would take before I finally gave in. She told me it was okay to keep my distance and that I wasn't obligated to let them back into my life on their terms, especially if it was causing me so much stress. I felt a wave of relief knowing I wasn't alone and feeling like their behavior was manipulative. But it didn't stop there. The next day, I noticed my parents had both followed me on Instagram, a platform I had used to stay connected with college friends, but had kept private without any family members. I hadn't blocked them before, since they'd never used social media much, but it was unsettling to see them pop up now. Even stranger, I noticed my mother had liked some old posts on my profile, the last one from about 2 years ago, when I first moved to this new state for work. It felt like they were going out of their way to leave a mark, like they were reminding me they could still keep an eye on me. That night, I got a message from my aunt again. She asked if I'd spoken to my parents recently, saying they were worried and didn't know how else to reach me since I'd been so closed off. She told me they knew where I lived and hinted that they were considering flying over for a quick visit to talk things out. My aunt played it off as if it was no big deal, saying they just wanted to set things straight and were only showing up to give me some clarity about their intentions. But the way she spoke made it clear that they'd already made up their minds to show up. My aunt even added that I was overreacting, and that this situation wasn't as big of a deal as I was making it out to be. The worst part of it all was realizing they knew exactly where I lived. When I first moved here 2 years ago, I'd never shared my address with them, hoping for a fresh start without the constant worry of them interfering in my life. It struck me that they might have found my address through other relatives, or maybe even through an online search. Knowing how persistent they can be, it sent chills down my spine to think they'd been quietly keeping tabs on me. I was horrified, but not entirely surprised. Feeling on edge, I emailed my parents again, making it very clear that I wasn't comfortable with any surprise visits and reminding them again that I needed space. I explained that if they truly wanted to make amends, it would have to be done respectfully and without trying to track me down or follow me online. I thought my tone was polite but firm, hoping that if they read it carefully, they'd realize that showing up uninvited would only push me further away. Their response came quickly. My mother replied with a long, guilt-tripping message about how they couldn't believe I was treating them like strangers, and how it broke their hearts to see me so distant and ungrateful after all they'd done for me. She talked about how family should always be there for each other, and how they were just trying to support me in a way they thought I would appreciate. It was all framed as if they were doing me some grand favor by being persistent, and I was too stubborn to understand their love. She even said that someday I'd look back and regret pushing them away when all they wanted was to help me heal from the past. After reading that, I was done. I felt drained mentally and emotionally from trying to hold my ground and constantly having to explain my perspective. I took a few hours to collect myself and then sent one final message, firmly stating that if they showed up at my home uninvited, I would call the police. I made it very clear that I was serious, that this wasn't a negotiation, and that if they truly respected me, they would back off and allow me to live my life without interference. The next day, I heard from a cousin on my father's side who rarely ever calls me. She'd heard through the grapevine that I'd threatened my parents with police action, and she wanted to know what was going on. At this point, I felt like my life had become some kind of twisted family soap opera, with everyone getting involved and throwing their opinions at me. My cousin kept saying things like, "Your parents have been through so much," and "Isn't there a way to work this out peacefully?" I almost couldn't believe what I was hearing. It felt like they were all reading from the same script, trying to guilt me into complying with whatever narrative my parents had spun for them. In a moment of desperation, I ended up going through my social media profiles and adjusting all my privacy settings, even going so far as to block certain family members who had shown an interest in meddling. I also decided to get a P.O. box for any future mail because it dawned on me that they might start sending letters to my home address if I continued to resist their attempts to contact me. One last thing happened yesterday that solidified my decision to keep my boundaries strong. I got a notification from my apartment's management office saying there was a visitor asking to confirm if I live there. Thankfully, the staff member at the desk didn't give them any information, but the description sounded eerily like my father. I felt my heart race as I realized just how far they were willing to go. It was as if they thought if they just showed up, they could break through my defenses and convince me to let them back in. So, here I am now, still standing my ground but feeling a mix of exhaustion and fear. I've spent years building my independence and learning how to stand up for myself, but this entire ordeal has made me question just how much strength I have left to keep fighting them off. Part of me feels a small pang of guilt, wondering if they'll ever truly understand why I need this space or if they're genuinely just lost in their own perspective. But then I remember the years of manipulation, the emotional blackmail, and the constant reminder that my life was never fully my own around them. Update 3. Hello, people. It's been almost a month since everything escalated, and thankfully, a lot has happened since. I have some good news that's given me a bit of peace. My boyfriend and I decided it was time to move into a new place together. We were planning this for a while, but after this whole incident with my parents, we just became more sure about this. We found a small but cozy apartment a few towns over that felt like a fresh start, away from the old address my parents had somehow tracked down. We finalized the move just last week, and while I'm still keeping my guard up, I feel like there's finally some space between me and their reach. It's a big relief knowing they'd have to work even harder to track me down again. Hopefully, they won't try. Throughout all this, I've stayed in close contact with my friend who's been my sounding board through these chaotic weeks. She recently attended a gathering that my parents happened to be at as well. I wasn't thrilled to know they'd be in the same room, but I trusted her judgment. Apparently, my parents have taken their narrative to a new level. They've been telling anyone who will listen that I've abandoned them, that I'm ungrateful, and that they raised me with nothing but love, only for me to walk out and disrespect them. My friend kept her cool at first, just listening to what they were saying without interrupting. But things escalated. According to her, they painted a picture of me as some spoiled brat kid who had used them up and left once I didn't need them anymore. They spoke about my disrespect for family values, and how heartbroken they were by my refusal to forgive them. My mother apparently even went so far as to talk about all the things they'd supposedly sacrificed for me growing up, spinning it as if I'd turned my back on my duties to them. I was absolutely disgusted to hear this. Everything they were saying was so twisted, such a warped view of the reality I'd lived through. It hurt to know they were spreading this story about me to people who didn't know any better. But what else could we expect from them, right? But my friend didn't let it slide. She stepped in, directly called them out in front of everyone, and laid down the truth. She told everyone there about the years of manipulation and emotional abuse they'd put me through, about how they'd repeatedly dismissed and controlled me, used me for financial help when it suited them, and only turned to me now out of convenience. She brought up the fact that they tried to track me down, ignored my boundaries, and even attempted to show up unannounced despite me asking them not to. She didn't hold back on any of it. I was in shock hearing her recount it. She truly went to bat for me in a way I didn't even know I needed. The most surprising part was that my parents didn't deny a single thing she said. They sat there quietly listening, with only occasional mutterings of, "We did a lot for her," or, "But she's our daughter." Not once did they attempt to refute what she was saying. They didn't deny their actions or explain their side. They just looked uncomfortable and embarrassed. From what my friend told me, it was clear that, for once, they were facing people who weren't going to automatically take their side. They couldn't control the narrative anymore, and I think it finally hit them just how much they'd messed up. After that, my friend said there was a noticeable shift in how people were interacting with my parents. They lost that social status they'd once relied on. People who used to flock to them were now keeping their distance, unwilling to get involved in the mess they'd created. They were left to fend for themselves, stripped of the support they always leaned on to boost their image. I didn't realize until then how much they valued that external validation and how important it was for them to be seen as respected members of the community. Now that they'd been exposed, they'd lost the facade that made them feel powerful and in control. Despite this, they didn't stop trying to get through to me. I received constant messages and emails from both of them, filled with emotional pleas and occasionally attempts at guilt-tripping me. Some long, drawn-out letters about how I'm breaking up the family, tearing them apart, and disappointing them in ways they never thought possible. They've even tried calling from blocked numbers, leaving me lengthy voicemails that I've stopped listening to altogether. This went on for a while. I decided I needed to take a stronger stand. I sent them one final email, a simple but clear message telling them that if they didn't stop this harassment, I would involve the police. I warned them that their actions were crossing into territory that could be legally classified as stalking, and that I wouldn't hesitate to file a restraining order if they continued. I spelled it out as plainly as I could, hoping that the threat of legal action would finally make them understand that I was serious about my boundaries. The next few days were tense. I received one last email from my mother, filled with dramatic statements about how they'd only tried to do what was best for me, and how I was throwing away the only family I had. There was a brief line that I'm sure was intended to scare me, where she wrote, "One day you'll regret this decision. You'll look back and wonder why you couldn't just let things go." It was the kind of veiled threat that used to get under my skin, but now it only made me feel even more sure that I was doing the right thing. After that last message, things went quiet. I felt an immense weight lift off my shoulders, as if I was finally beginning to reclaim the freedom I'd been fighting for. It was a strange feeling, realizing that they might actually be backing off. I don't know if they're actually done trying to reach me, but for now, the silence is a relief, and I'm taking this time to focus on myself, my relationship, and the new life I'm building without their interference. Reddit, I don't know if this chapter with my parents is closed for good, or if they'll try to find another way back into my life. For now, I'm content with the steps I've taken to protect myself and my happiness. It's been a long journey, one I'm still navigating, but I finally feel sorted and out of the whole family mess. Thank you for being here, everybody. Now on to the next story. Story 4. Sister banned our mom's new husband from her wedding, so she could pretend that mom was with our abusive bio dad. When mom refused to come, sister asked me to lie to her. My sister, Kristen, just got married this week to her husband, Jacob. Naturally, you'd expect her to be floating on cloud 9, enjoying every moment of her newlywed bliss. But things haven't quite gone that way for Kristen. Rather than soaking in the excitement of this new chapter in her life, she has been blowing up my phone for the past few days. You see, Kristen had sent an invitation to our mom to be there on her big day. But there was one notable catch. Mom was not allowed to bring a plus one. Our parents got divorced when we were pretty young, and ever since then, family dynamics have been tricky, to say the least. Growing up, my parents' marriage was nothing short of a nightmare. They fought constantly. As the oldest child, born just a year into their marriage, I had a front row seat to all of it. I have witnessed both my mom and dad at their worst. Their arguments were intense, filled with anger and bitterness. And as young as I was, I understood that something was deeply wrong between them. Kristen, my younger sister, came along 4 years later, and by that time I had already seen and heard far more than any child should have. Kristen, being the youngest, was naturally frightened by the chaos in our home. The shouting, the slamming doors, and the constant tension. It was a lot more terrifying for her while I was more used to it. Hence, as her older sibling, I felt it was my job to protect her, even though I was still just a child myself. Whenever our parents would argue, I would try to shield her from the worst of it, distracting her with toys or stories. Anything to take her mind off the screaming match going on in the next room. I remember holding her close whenever she'd get scared or nervous, telling her everything would be all right, even when I wasn't sure if it would be. As you can guess, I don't really like talking about this part of my life. It's painful, and honestly, I've tried to push a lot of those memories to the back of my mind. It wasn't just the verbal fights in our home that made it so unbearable. It was also how my dad would sometimes get violent, especially when he was drinking. I've lost count of the times I saw him hit my mom or use a belt on her, his anger completely out of control. He would lock her in the bathroom and refuse to let her come out until the early hours of the morning. Our mom, as much as she could, tried to protect us from it. When she knew he'd be coming home in one of his crazy moods, as she sometimes called it, she would wake me up and tell me to lock my bedroom door, to take care of Kristen, and keep her safe during those nights. Even though I was scared too, I would try to stay strong for my sister. I'd hold her in my arms, praying that somehow this would all end and that our mom would be okay. Those nights felt endless, and they left such emotional scars that I don't think ever fully healed. However, one of the hardest things about living with my dad was how he could switch between being a monster one moment and pretending everything was fine the next. After a particularly violent, drunken night, he would wake up the next morning acting as if nothing had ever happened. He'd go about his day talking to us normally, as though he hadn't been screaming, hitting, or locking my mom in the bathroom just hours earlier. It was maddening, and if my mom ever tried to confront him about his behavior, about the beatings, the yelling, or the way he treated her, he would act like he had no memory of it. He'd blame the alcohol or just flat out deny that anything had occurred and give excuses like, "I don't remember," or "I don't think I behaved that way." To make matters worse, if Mom ever brought up divorce, he would then start following up with false promises. He'd swear up and down that he was going to change from that day forward. He'd promise that he was done drinking, that he would stop hurting her. But those words were hollow. It was all part of his manipulation. He never followed through on any of those promises. The cycle would just continue. Another night of drinking, another outburst, another morning of denial. And for my mom, it must have been soul-crushing to hope, even for a moment, that maybe this time her husband was going to change, only to be let down again and again. If you're wondering whether my dad had some sort of mental disorder that made him act the way he did, I wish I could say yes, because that would have given us a way to understand his behavior, maybe even a bit of clarity or closure. But the truth is, he didn't have any diagnosable condition that we knew of. He wasn't suffering from anything that could explain the years of abuse. He was just a deeply narcissistic, manipulative person who seemed to take some sort of sick pleasure in causing pain, especially to my mom. It wasn't about mental illness. It was about control and cruelty. The breaking point, I think what finally made my mom leave Dad, the moment that broke everything, was the day when he raised his hands on me. She had endured so much abuse herself, but when it came to us, her children, she had a limit. That limit was crossed when she had to attend her mother's funeral. She couldn't take us, me or Kristen, with her because we had school the next day and she didn't want us to miss it. Before she left, she had talked to Dad repeatedly, pleading with him not to drink for just 2 nights while she would be away. It was her mother's funeral, after all, and she couldn't handle the added stress of worrying about us on top of everything else. My dad, of course, had no interest in attending the funeral with her. Begrudgingly, he agreed to stay home and take care of us. However, the very first night she was away, he came home drunk. I was asleep in my room when he stumbled in, reeking of alcohol, slurring his words. He started yelling at me, asking where Mom was, clearly too drunk to remember that she was at the funeral. My heart was pounding in my chest, and I tried to answer him calmly, my voice shaking. I told him that Mom was away at the funeral, but he was staggering around the room, knocking things over and kicking furniture, completely out of control. I was terrified that he would wake Kristen, who was sleeping next to me. So in a shaky voice, I asked him if he could keep it down and get out of our room as he was starting to scare me. That apparently set him off. He exploded in a fit of rage, screaming at me for having the audacity to tell him what to do in his house and how he could talk as loud as he wanted. He kept ranting about how I had no respect for him, how I was just like my mom, defying him. I could see him losing control, and I knew where this was headed. I tried to calm him down, to de-escalate the situation, but it only made him angrier. He lashed out, and before I knew it, he slapped me hard across the face. I fell down on the floor, clutching my face. Kristen, who had woken up by now thanks to Dad's yelling, started to cry, clutching onto me in fear, her small body trembling. I was terrified too. My heart was pounding in my chest, and I could feel my hands shaking. But I knew that if I didn't do something, if I just stayed frozen in that moment, things were only going to get worse. Dad was on the verge of completely losing control, and I couldn't let him hurt us or, worse, hurt my sister. I made a split-second decision. Grabbing Kristen's hand, I pulled her along with me, running out of the house as fast as I could while Dad stumbled behind us, still yelling, his words slurring from the alcohol. My only thought was to get us somewhere safe, and I remembered what Mom had told me in moments like this. Go to the neighbors. They were the only ones nearby, and we needed help fast. I ran straight to their house, my heart racing, and started pounding on their door, ringing the doorbell over and over again. I must have looked like a shaking, crying, desperate mess, but I didn't care. When they opened the door, they looked at us and already kind of knew that we needed help. They had heard my dad yelling at us before, seen glimpses of our chaotic home life, and had probably put the pieces together a long time ago. Without hesitation, they let us inside and immediately called 911. We also called my mom and asked her to come back home. She must have heard the panic in my voice because she promised right away that she would be on the next flight home. I felt a small sense of relief, knowing that help was finally on the way. Our neighbors reassured me that I did the right thing by getting away from Dad, as there was no guarantee of what he might have done to us in his drunken state. It was a night I'll never forget. When Mom came back and found out what had happened, she first hugged me and cried profusely for what had happened to me. She had endured years of abuse, but when it was directed at me, at her child, she couldn't take it anymore. It was like something inside her snapped. That was the moment she decided to leave him for good. After CPS was called, my mom had to step in to reassure them that both my sister and I would be staying with her from that point onward. My dad moved out with some of his belongings while my mom began the process of filing for divorce. Throughout this time, Mom would apologize to me over and over again, expressing her profound regret for not having left Dad sooner. I never really blamed my mom, but I know she still carries a lot of guilt for what happened. Despite all that Dad had done to us, true to his manipulative nature, he didn't simply just go away. He kept calling my mom repeatedly, even after he had moved out and she had filed for divorce, insisting that she should reconsider leaving him. Sometimes he would even insist on speaking to me, where he would attempt to guilt-trip me for the whole thing. He'd say things like, "You're the reason this family broke up," and laid the blame squarely on me and Kristen for the way we ran out and called the police that night, as if it was our fault for wanting safety and peace, as if we were wrong for not wanting to live in that environment any longer. He would constantly insist that even with the divorce, He was still our father and would forever be in our lives, even if we didn't want to see him. I was terrified at the thought of ever being close to my dad again. I would pray every day to God that I never wanted to live with him again. Thankfully, when it came time for the courts to decide, the judge listened to us. They granted my mom full custody, which felt like a victory. Not only that, but they also issued a restraining order against my dad for the repeated instances of abuse he had subjected on us. This decision by the court changed our lives forever. It was a huge relief knowing that we were legally protected from him and that he couldn't come near us anymore. For the first time in a long time, the three of us, Kristen, Mom, and me, had the space to heal, away from the chaos and fear that had dominated our lives for so long. Of course, it wasn't all easy to live with Mom since she did have her own issues, but it was much better to live without Dad. During this time, my mom became deeply depressed. She had just gone through the devastating loss of her partner, my dad, and was still in the painful process of healing from the emotional and psychological scars left by the abuse she had endured. On top of that, she was also dealing with the added pressure of finding a job to support herself and her 2 children. It is a lot for anyone to handle, and watching her go through it all on her own was incredibly hard. Thankfully, there was a bit of relief for her because my dad was ordered to pay child support for both me and my sister, Kristen. At the very least, we knew we could rely on that money to help meet our basic needs, so that took one burden off my mom's shoulders. Felix enters the picture. A few years after the divorce, my mom started dating Felix. He worked with her at the restaurant, and from the beginning he was always there to help her out. He had asked her out multiple times, but she had always turned him down until she finally gave in. She came back from their first date beaming with excitement, and I knew that my mom was finally moving on. What stood out, though, was that Felix was significantly younger than my mom, and I think that made her feel a bit self-conscious. I remember asking her about him once, and she got visibly embarrassed. It was clear she felt people would judge her about the age difference, but from my perspective, I was just happy for her. I had seen her break down in tears so many times during her marriage to my dad, feeling trapped in a toxic and painful situation, that seeing her smile and have fun again was a huge relief for me. Throughout all of this, while I've always been supportive of my mom and her relationship with Felix, my sister Kristen has had a completely different reaction. In fact, she hates Felix with a passion, and it's not because he's ever done anything wrong to her. Her intense dislike stems more from the idea of our mom moving on and being with someone other than our dad. For some reason, Kristen has always held on to this twisted, almost idealized belief that our mom and dad were destined to be together, like they were soulmates or something. Despite everything that happened between them, she somehow expected that after a few years apart, they would eventually reconcile and get back together. I've thought a lot about why Kristen feels this way, and I honestly believe most of it comes from the influence of our dad. I blame him for planting these ideas in her head. Even though I haven't seen much of him over the years, Kristen continued to visit him from time to time after the divorce, whenever he would make some time for her. It wasn't a regular thing, but when she did see him, it seemed like he took those opportunities to manipulate her thinking. He would tell her that he was changing or improving himself for the sake of the family, and that he would eventually get back together with our mom. So every time Kristen came home after spending time with him, she'd be full of hope and dreams about how the 4 of us, her, me, Mom, and Dad, would one day be a family again. It was hard to hear her talk about it because deep down, I knew it was never going to happen. I tried to reason with her, tried to explain that the relationship between Mom and Dad was over for a good reason, but she was completely convinced that our dad still loved Mom and that only he deserved to be with her. However, none of the fantasies Kristen clung to ever came true. As time went on and Felix became a bigger part of our mom's life, it became clear that Mom had moved on for good. I think that reality, seeing Mom happy with someone else, shattered the dream Kristen had been holding on to for so long, and that's where her grudge against Felix really stems from. In fact, 4 years ago, Felix and my mom finally got married. It's been amazing to witness the transformation in my mom's life, seeing her go from being in such a dark place to finding happiness and stability with someone who truly cares for her. Felix is a wonderful guy and has been there for me and my sister whenever we needed him. The wedding debacle. This year, when my sister Kristen got engaged to her college sweetheart, She shared with me that she planned on inviting our dad to her wedding. Hearing this really caught me off guard. I haven't seen or had any contact with our dad in a long time, and honestly, I've never understood why Kristen continues to have a relationship with him. He was abusive, both emotionally and physically, yet Kristen seems to have this inexplicable attachment to him. However, it was her wedding, and I knew it wasn't my place to dictate who she should or shouldn't invite, so I kept my thoughts to myself. But then something happened that really bothered me. When Kristen sent out the wedding invitations, she decided that our mom wasn't allowed to bring a +1. Mom called me after receiving her invitation, confused and upset, asking if I had been denied a +1 as well. I was shocked because, as far as I knew, everyone else was allowed to bring a guest. Kristen knew full well that Felix was a significant part of our family now. He wasn't just some casual boyfriend. He and Mom were married. So it was incredibly strange, even hurtful, that he hadn't even received an invitation and, worse, that Mom wasn't allowed to bring him as her guest. When Mom confronted Kristen about it, things quickly escalated. Kristen demanded that, for the sake of her wedding, she basically wanted Mom to play happy family with our dad in front of her future in-laws. Kristen didn't care that Mom was now married to Felix. In her mind, she saw her wedding as a chance to force this fantasy reunion of her mom and dad. Mom was absolutely stunned by this demand and understandably refused to go along with Kristen's condition. After all, how could she possibly pretend everything was fine with my dad, let alone play the role of his wife again after what he had put her through? It was an unfair and unrealistic expectation, and she was deeply hurt by it. I tried to step in and talk to Kristen myself, hoping to make her realize how unreasonable and hurtful her demands were. I wanted to remind her that Mom had every right to be happy and had moved forward with her life. But instead of listening, Kristen completely blew up on me as well. She lashed out, accusing me of never liking our dad and even blaming me for their separation. Hearing that accusation from her was devastating. As her older sibling, I had always been the one to protect her from Dad's abuse when we were growing up. I shielded her as much as I could from his anger, his manipulation, and his violence. Yet here she was, twisting the narrative, making me out to be the villain in her story. In the end, my mom made the difficult decision to stand her ground and refuse to attend Kristen's wedding. After everything that had happened, the arguments, the unreasonable demands, and the emotional strain, Mom knew she couldn't pretend to play the role Kristen wanted her to, especially not when it meant disrespecting her own marriage to Felix. As for my dad, he did attend the wedding, but it was far from a pleasant experience. The moment he arrived, I could tell he was already drunk. He reeked of alcohol, and his behavior was erratic, just like I had expected him to be. I made it a point to stay as far away from him as possible and didn't even make eye contact with him the entire time. It was hard enough being in the same room with him, and I just couldn't bear the thought of interacting with him. Things got worse when it came time for the speeches. Dad was expected to say a few words to congratulate the couple, but instead of delivering a heartfelt message, he ended up slurring his way through the speech because of the multiple glasses of whiskey he already had. It was embarrassing to watch, and I could see the discomfort on people's faces. Clearly, inviting Dad to the wedding had been a huge mistake. Other than him, the wedding itself was fine overall. Now, after the wedding, the situation with Kristen's in-laws has grown complicated. They have started asking questions about our family, especially about why Mom didn't show up for her wedding. Since they have met Mom before and have seen how she is always so supportive of her children, I guess they are starting to suspect that Kristen might have done or said something. Instead of being upfront with them, Kristen has started spinning a narrative, painting Mom in a bad light. She has been telling her husband's relatives that Mom was uninterested in attending the wedding and that despite multiple pleas, Mom didn't care much to attend. Obviously, this is a big fat lie. But what makes this worse is Kristen has now asked me to get involved. She's planning a lunch with her in-laws after she returns from her honeymoon, and she wants me to be there to back her up in front of them. Basically, she's expecting me to support her version of events and help her convince the in-laws that Mom's absence was something inexplicable, as if she had no real reason for not attending. Kristen doesn't want them to know the real story, that she had placed unfair demands on Mom which led to the fallout. Instead, She's looking for me to cover for her and keep the blame away from her. This is why I am on Reddit today. On one hand, Kristen's my sister, and I want to support her, especially now that she's starting a new chapter in her life. But on the other hand, lying to cover up the truth only prolongs the problem and will only get messier if we keep pretending. Kristen's in-laws deserve to know the real story if they're asking, and I'm not sure I can be part of a charade that makes Mom look bad just so Kristen can avoid taking the blame. Update 1. My sister Kristen has always been embarrassed about our mom's relationship with Felix. Felix is 6 years younger than Mom, which honestly isn't a huge gap, but for some reason, Kristen thinks this is something inappropriate and believes that Mom shouldn't have married a younger man. Also, the truth is that Kristen has never really told her in-laws that Mom and Felix are married. Yes, her husband Jacob knows, but not the rest of the family. Mom and Felix had a simple court wedding with no big ceremony or celebration. They've never posted pictures or made a big deal out of it, which has allowed Kristen to always pretend that Felix isn't a permanent part of Mom's life. Kristen has even gone so far as to repeatedly ask Mom not to mention her marriage to Felix to any of her friends or her in-laws, telling her how embarrassed and awkward she feels by it. Mom, being as patient and understanding as she always is, used to agree to Kristen's requests for a long time. She never pushed back and kept Felix in the background whenever Kristen asked, respecting her feelings, even though it wasn't fair since she believed that Kristen would eventually grow up. However, things changed when Kristen didn't allow Felix to attend her wedding. I guess that was the breaking point for Mom. She had already compromised so much to accommodate Kristen's discomfort, but this request crossed the line. After years of adjusting herself to make Kristen feel comfortable, Mom finally put her foot down. She had reached her limit, and I don't blame her at all for standing up for herself. As for my dad, I've long come to the conclusion that he never truly loved anyone except himself. If he had really loved Mom, there's no way he would have put her through the kind of abuse that he did. Part of the reason Kristen is so stuck on the idea of seeing our parents reunite is that she doesn't really remember the full extent of the abuse Dad inflicted on us. She was younger than me when it all happened, and her memories are fragmented. Mom has always asked me not to bring up the past with Kristen to spare her from the painful details of what we endured. Because of this, she remembers only bits and pieces of the toxic environment. Hence, she is able to play down the seriousness of what we went through. Update 2. Thanks everyone for all your advice. I showed the post and comments to Mom, and she finally agreed to sit down and talk to Kristen this week about everything. Long story short, Mom showed Kristen the hospital records and the divorce filings and told her in detail about the abuse she received at the hands of my father. Kristen, who had vehemently refused to accept the truth for so long, was left speechless. I could see in her face that this shattered the illusion she had held on to for years. For so long, she had convinced herself that our family's problems weren't that serious, that maybe Mom and Dad just had a few rough patches. But now confronted with hard evidence, she couldn't deny what had happened. However, Kristen still tried to argue by claiming that maybe Dad had changed after the divorce and maybe he wasn't the same person he used to be. She urged Mom to give him another chance by at least being friends with him. But at that point, both Mom and I were firm with her. We told her that if she truly believed that Dad had changed and wanted to keep glorifying him in front of us, knowing everything we had suffered, then maybe it was time for us to take a break from each other. It wasn't an ultimatum, but it was a boundary. We were tired of hearing Kristen idolize Dad. This deeply offended Kristen. She wasn't expecting us to be so direct and has asked for some time to think about everything. I understand why she is hurt, but I also think she needs to hear it. It's not that I want her to stop talking to Dad. She's entitled to her own relationship with him. However, what I do want is for her to stop worshiping him and let go of her unrealistic expectation of reuniting the family. Update 3. So, it's been 4 months since my last update. Eventually, Kristen came clean to her in-laws about the real reason why Mom didn't attend her wedding. I think after learning the full extent of the truth, she realized that hiding it and blaming Mom wasn't just unfair. It was damaging to their relationship. It must have been hard for her to admit the truth, but she did it anyway. Once her in-laws understood the reality of what our family had been through, they were much more understanding about Mom's absence. Since then, Kristen has taken a huge step forward by also apologizing to Mom. Mom, in her usual way, was gracious and willing to forgive. She also took the initiative to speak with Kristen's in-laws, smoothing things over and clarifying any misunderstandings. For now, Kristen has gone low contact with Dad. It has been such a relief to see this whole messy situation finally settle down. Now on to the next story. Story 5. My wife had an affair with my friend and got pregnant. I raised their son believing he was mine. When I filed for divorce, my sister kept pressuring me to pay child support. For context, my soon-to-be ex-wife, Allison, 32F, and I, 34M, had been together for 5 years and married for 3 when I found out that she had been cheating on me with one of my friends. It had been an on-and-off affair since my friend stays out of state, and apparently, they would only get together whenever he would be back here. Unfortunately, one of those times she ended up getting pregnant, and for the past few months we have been raising her son together. I'd been raising him believing him to be my child, when all along his father has been my friend, not me. Allison could have told me about it right from the beginning and done the decent thing, but she chose to keep this all a secret. I never would have found out about any of this, but I came across some pretty incriminating emails on her laptop a couple of months ago. It was a conversation between her and my friend where he was telling her that he wanted nothing to do with her or the kid and wanted to end things with her because he was not ready to be a father or take up that kind of responsibility. She was begging him not to do that, but he had his mind made up. After I came across that email, I put 2 and 2 together by reading through other emails and chats, and after confronting her, I decided to file for a divorce. It has been extremely emotionally draining for me, and the past couple of months have been difficult. But Allison has made it worse by trying to get child support out of me. Not just child support, she is also demanding a huge amount of alimony, and I'm just not ready to pay. So we have been fighting in court, and things have become very complicated and exhausting for me. She and her lawyer have been playing some pretty dirty games for the past couple of months ever since I initiated the legal proceedings, and they are trying to get as much money as they possibly can out of me. But my lawyer and I have also been fighting back hard and getting people to testify in our favor, be it friends, family, or even coworkers, proving that we don't owe her anything. The waiting period is about to come to an end soon, and I really want to wrap this up as quickly as I possibly can since it has been almost 6 months since I filed for a divorce. Things have become pretty drawn out because we live in a state where, regardless of paternity, if a man was married to and has parented a kid with a woman, they are liable to be recognized as a legal parent of the child, and that's what we are struggling with right now. The only problem in the situation has been my older sister, Hannah, 37F, who has been acting very strangely and actually expects me to help Allison out. It all started a couple of weeks after I filed for divorce, and Allison decided that she was going to demand child support from me even though I was not the legal father. She knew that I knew that, and it had even been proven in court, but she was trying to take advantage of the law and try to twist it in her favor. I thought that it was really unfair because, as it is, it was very difficult for me to come to terms with the fact that the son whom I had been raising so far was not related to me at all. I was having to leave behind an entire family that I thought I had, my wife and my child, just so that I could start fresh. I have a normal job and a mediocre income, so I really did not think it was fair for Allison to demand child support from me, knowing that I could not afford to be spending money on a kid that was not even mine. It was harsh, but it was the truth, and I really wanted nothing to do with her or her son anymore after I had wasted almost a year of my life, including the pregnancy, on them anyway. Besides, she was the one who had cheated on me, so I did not understand why I needed to be punished for it. She had always relied on me for money because she had never taken her job seriously and was always overlooked for promotions, so she had been stuck in her job for a really long time. Her company did not really pay her well, and her position did not seem to improve with time, so she had always been heavily dependent on me for money. While we were married, I did not have an issue with it, but now that I knew that she had been cheating and that her son had nothing to do with me, I did not think it was necessary for me to worry about her financial situation. I knew for a fact that she would end up struggling without me, but I couldn't bring myself to care about it, and I thought that it was fair enough. However, my sister thought that I was being heartless and told me as much. In the first couple of months, she would only try to convince me and keep telling me that Allison had kept in touch with her, and every time they would speak, she would be doing worse than before. Her financial situation was dire because even her parents had to look out for themselves, and the most they could do was offer her a place to live, but she had to contribute to the expenses, and it was becoming difficult for her to continue to afford a lawyer for everything. I had a pretty straightforward solution for that. She could simply just not drag out this whole legal mess and accept my terms. That way, she wouldn't even need a lawyer for long. But for some reason, even Hannah thought that I was being unfair and that since I had been raising the child for the past couple of months, I should continue to do so even though he's not related to me by blood, and my refusal to do so is an indication of how heartless and selfish I am. I don't understand her logic, and to be honest, it's just been a few months. I was pretty attached to the kid when I thought he was our son, but now he just reminds me of the fact that my wife had been having an affair with my friend. I don't know if it's the right or wrong thing to do, but I know that I can't stand the idea of contributing to her expenses and paying child support, especially given the circumstances. So, after a few fights, I decided to cut Hannah out of my life because she kept siding with Allison, and it was getting really exhausting for me to deal with all of this. For a couple of weeks, she kept texting me and trying to call me, but I did not respond. When it got too much to deal with, I decided to block her altogether. But she did not even stop at that. She gave it a rest for a couple of weeks, and I thought that it was almost over, but then she started showing up at my house. Not only that, she also started using other people's numbers to contact me and tell me that what I was doing was really wrong. Eventually, it got to where she was acting totally crazy and threatening to testify against me in court if I did not pay child support to Allison. It made absolutely no sense to me because from what I knew, it was not like they were particularly close, nor did she stand to gain anything from this, unless they had some arrangement that I was not aware of, which, as it turns out, was the case. Anyway, when she started to threaten me and say that she was going to testify against me in court if I did not pay child support, I really started to break down because this was my sister that we were talking about, and the fact that she did not seem to be on my side here, even though I was clearly the victim, just did not sit right with me. When I asked her for an explanation for all of this, she just told me that her maternal instincts had been going strong and she just could not bear to see another mother in pain, struggling financially, and trying to find her footing after I abandoned her, and that was why she was putting me through so much. Just because of her so-called maternal instincts. It was shocking that her sisterly instinct had never seemed to kick in at any point. We got into really terrible arguments over this, to the point where our parents had to intervene and try to calm things down because the mudslinging had become too much to bear for the rest of the family. To be fair, she was the one who had started it. I didn't even want to publicize any of this, but she tried to make me look like the villain in front of the rest of the family as well. And for the record, I don't think it counts as abandoning a child if the child is not even yours, and more importantly, even if it is abandoning a child, that's for the courts to decide and not her. As for Allison, I don't even think that I abandoned her at any point. She is the one who abandoned me when she started cheating on me without any reason because, as far as I know, I had never really given her a valid reason to go out of her way to cheat on me. Even when I confronted her, she couldn't come up with a single reason to cheat on me, and that was it. So, I really couldn't figure out for the life of me why on earth was my sister siding with Allison until recently. A couple of days ago, she showed up at my house, and I told her to go away, but she just started crying, and she told me that she really needed to talk to me and explain her behavior because she felt like she owed it to me and she just couldn't do this anymore. She sounded really upset and distressed, so I decided to let her in this time. For the past couple of weeks, we had had absolutely no contact after our last fight because our parents had told us both to stay away from each other since it was clear that we were not getting along anymore, and it was becoming embarrassing for the family. It was almost over a month since I had last spoken to her or heard from her, and I was quite relieved without her. But when I heard her talking in that depressed voice outside my door, I couldn't help myself, and I let her in because I really wanted to know what was actually going on, and it seemed like she was finally going to offer a real explanation. So I let her in, and she totally broke down. She hugged me and told me that she was really sorry about everything that she had been putting me through because it had all been really selfish. She confessed what I already knew, that those excuses that she had been coming up with about maternal instinct and stuff were all just that, excuses. Then she told me that she had to make a confession about the real reason, and she wanted me to forgive her and not judge her. She then proceeded to tell me that the real reason she had been hiding from Allison so far was because Allison knew about one of her biggest secrets. Apparently, Hannah is no better than Allison herself because she also has a 3-year-old daughter with her husband whom she has been with for almost 7 years and has been married to for 5 of those years. And yet she has never told him that she had cheated on him with one of her friends from college when she had run into him at the union. She and her husband had been going through a particularly difficult phase of their marriage. She had a short-lived fling with him, but she ended it soon after she found out she was pregnant. However, after her daughter was born, she got a couple of paternity tests conducted and found out that, unfortunately, the father of her daughter was not her husband but the guy she had had that affair with. She had kept this a secret from everyone for a really long time until Allison finally discovered this last year. Apparently, the guy that Hannah had had that affair with from her college is now married to one of Allison's cousins, and I even attended the wedding with her last year. But what I did not know was that while talking to her cousin, Allison had discovered that her cousin's husband had gone to the same college as Hannah, and when Allison brought that up with her cousin, she seemed to get upset. That's how Allison found out that Hannah had had an affair with this guy, and the reason he had was because he had found out that she was married, which she hadn't bothered to tell him. Thankfully, this guy seems to be a decent chap, and he had been very upfront with his wife, Allison's cousin, and told her about his previous affair with Hannah. He had to tell her because even after he had ended the affair, she continued to reach out to him periodically and would try to get him to be a part of her life again because she was still having a troublesome phase with my brother-in-law. This behavior continued throughout her pregnancy and even a couple of months after that until she finally realized that he was not coming back, and she stopped reaching out to him. She hadn't even told the guy about the paternity test, so he had no idea that he had a daughter, and my brother-in-law thought that he had a daughter, but in reality that was not his child. It was all very messed up, and on top of that, I realized that Allison had never mentioned any of this to me, even though this was my sister that we were talking about. Hannah told me that after finding out about her affair once she had attended her cousin's wedding, she came back and confronted Hannah about it, and she had to admit the truth. But shockingly, they actually ended up bonding over it because even Allison had been pregnant at the time, and she suspected that the baby was not really mine. Since Allison had promised to keep her secret, Hannah had decided to trust her and had even told her about her daughter's real paternity. It was very disturbing that they had bonded over something like this. But what's worse was that now Allison had turned it all around and was using that information against Hannah, and apparently that was why Hannah had been acting so strangely with me for the past couple of months and trying to get me to agree to Allison's terms, because she was threatening to expose her to her husband and even tell him that their daughter was not really his. Obviously, Hannah does not want that to happen anymore because she has managed to fix things with her husband, and the affair and stuff is a thing of the past. She does not want to put her marriage and her daughter's life at stake, but unfortunately, Allison already knows too much, and that's why she had me threatening her, trying to get me to agree to her terms. She had been trying to keep this up for the past 6 months, but now it was just getting way too much for her to handle, and she decided that her best bet would be to just come clean to me and tell me the truth, and then maybe I would help her out. What's the most shocking about this was that, firstly, she had actually expected me to help her out after everything that she had told me, which just proved that she was just as terrible as Allison, if not more. What was even more shocking was that she had been stupid enough to trust Allison with all her secrets, even after finding out that Allison had been cheating on me and was obviously not a good or trustworthy person. But then again, I guess birds of a feather do flock together, so it worked out exactly the way it should have. Anyway, after hearing her out, I was really shocked, and I told her that I wanted nothing to do with her, that she was a disgusting person, and that whatever was going to happen to her, she totally deserved it. She started to break down but did not argue with me, and I told her to leave the house, and she did. The only thing that she requested of me was not to tell my brother-in-law about anything that she had just told me, but I'm not sure I can do that. I guess at this point, he is the only person who will be able to understand what I'm going through. More importantly, it's just a decent thing to do. I'm not Allison, who is going to use this information against Hannah at any point. As somebody who has been tricked, I wouldn't want that to happen to anybody else, and I think it's my moral duty to tell him the truth. But at the same time, it's really none of my business. So, now, what should I do about telling my brother-in-law that my sister had had an affair and he's not the real father of their baby? Update 1. Thank you so much to everybody who responded to my post, and for those of you who are wondering, yes, I did it. I knew that it was the right thing to do. I was just waiting for reassurance because I knew that it was going to be a difficult conversation to have. I knew that it would break his heart when he got to the truth, but ultimately, he had to find out so that he could do what was best for him. And for my brother-in-law, he has been raising his daughter for 3 years, believing her to be his own. I'm sure it couldn't have been easy for him to find out, but I knew that I had to tell him. So, I contacted him a couple of hours ago, and I told him to come over because I wanted to talk to him in person. These are not things that can be discussed over the phone. Anyway, so he came by after work, probably thinking that I was here to talk about divorce and ask him for support or something. He started to tell me that he had heard about my fight with my sister, and he really did not want to get involved in stuff, but I had to stop him, and I just ripped off the Band-Aid because I did not know how else to do it. It really hurt me to do it as well because for a couple of seconds, he could not even process what I had said and was in total denial. He kept insisting that whatever I was saying just couldn't be true, that he knew for a fact that she would never be disloyal to him and that Hannah would never lie to him about his daughter at the very least. He told me that even if he believed me, I was telling him the truth about her affair. He refused to believe that she was lying to him about the paternity of her daughter and wasn't just lying to him right now. She had been lying to him for 3 years. He refused to believe me, but then when I told him that was the truth, he broke down. Something inside of him just snapped, and he started sobbing like crazy, and I could do nothing but just be there for him. Mind you, he and I are not particularly close, but at that moment I felt like he was family to me even more than Hannah herself. He was actually shaking while crying, and I could feel what he was feeling. To be honest, I tried to console him, but honestly, I really couldn't come up with words that would be enough to console him. I hadn't even been able to do it for myself. How could I possibly do it for him? Anyway, he was not in a state to respond for a couple of minutes, and then he started to tell me that he had always suspected that she had a thing with one of her college friends because she would talk about him a lot and constantly compare the two of them, and they would even fight about him. But she had always reassured him that there was nothing going on there, and honestly, even if there had been something there, he was totally over it because now, ever since their daughter had been born, he knew for a fact that both of them had been dedicated to each other as parents and as partners. But the one thing that he had never suspected was his daughter not being related to him. I told him that he could still get another paternity test conducted because we didn't need to just blindly trust whatever Hannah was telling us. But honestly, both of us knew that it was going to be pointless. Neither would Hannah lie to me at this point, nor would I lie to him. The paternity test would only prove what we already knew for a fact. It was just wishful thinking. He told me that it was not going to change anything between him and his daughter, and she was still going to be his little girl because whether she was his blood or not, it did not change the fact that he had been raising her for the past 3 years. The only thing that he was hurt about was that Hannah had never told him the truth, and this is how he had to find out from me after being together for so long. The least that she could have done for him and what she really owed him was at least the truth. After talking to me for a bit, he started breaking down again, and I really felt terrible for the guy. I actually started to feel bad for having told him at all, and I started to regret my decision, but then I guess he had to find out at some point and somehow. If not me, maybe Allison would have told him, and she wouldn't even have been there for him the way I was being there for him right now. She would have done it out of spite and for revenge. Maybe that's why Hannah had to come clean to me with the truth because she knew that I was going to tell my brother-in-law, but at least I wouldn't do it the way Allison would. She just didn't want to have to do it herself. I guess it was pretty cowardly, but I guess by now we have established the fact that she is definitely a coward. Anyway, he spent about an hour and a half at my place, and by the time he was ready to leave, he was still upset, but at least he was not sobbing. I offered to drive him back home because I did not think it was a good idea for him to be alone at the moment, but he insisted that he'd drive himself because he needed some time and space to clear his head. He thanked me for telling him the truth about what was going on and said that he was going to go home and confront Hannah, and I'm sure that he did because my parents just reached out to me a couple of minutes ago to tell me that Hannah had decided to come back home, and she had refused to tell them anything, but I told them to talk to me if they wanted to find out what was going on. So, even now, I had to be the bad guy and rip off the Band-Aid for somebody else because she was too much of a coward to tell them what she had done. I did it. I told my parents what had happened a couple of days ago when Hannah had told me the truth about why she had been siding with Allison all along, and then I told them that today I had told my brother-in-law about what Hannah had been up to behind his back. So, I was guessing that she had either been kicked out or had chosen to leave, but either way, she was not going back, and they were probably going to head for a divorce. My parents were naturally quite upset because my divorce was going to be finalized in a couple of weeks, and now they had another one to deal with. I could understand why they were upset, but at least in my situation, I was the victim. Can't say the same for Hannah, unfortunately. We talked for a couple of minutes, and they told me that Hannah had refused to even say a word to them ever since she had come back home and had just shut the door and refused to come out. At first, it had made sense then, but now that they knew what had happened, they knew that she was probably not going to be coming out or speaking to them normally for a really long time because she was probably ashamed of herself, and she should be after everything that she has done, not just to her husband but also to her brother. She really should be ashamed of herself. Anyway, now that all of this is out of the way, I have my own divorce to worry about as well because we have to wrap everything up in a couple of weeks, and I'm actually really nervous about what is going to happen. Update 2. So, I'll try to keep it short in this one because I have to get back to some important work, but my divorce finally got finalized earlier today. I haven't felt this happy and relieved in a really long time, and I'm going to celebrate once I get home. That's for sure. I'm mostly just happy that I got the divorce on my terms. I don't have to pay any alimony because she cheated, and I guess my side was more convincing. I also do not have to pay any sort of child support because the child is not mine, and I managed to prove that. If my wife handles her money carefully, she will definitely be able to do it on her own, and even if she isn't able to do that, she has a family to help her out. Since my absence is not really going to do the baby any particular harm because he probably won't even be able to remember me in a couple of months, I get to stay out of this just like I wanted to. I do still get to keep in touch with our son, but that's completely up to me. I don't have to visit or have anything to do with either of them if I don't want to, but I haven't made up my mind about that yet. I'm going to think about it and come to a conclusion later. Now, coming to my brother-in-law and Hannah. They are also getting divorced and he has already filed for it and she has been served. But he has demanded shared custody of their daughter and absolutely no child support or alimony or any sort of maintenance. And he is firm on that, so good for him. I hope things work out for him because he deserves better. Hannah is still staying with our parents, which means that I can't visit them for a while, but it's okay. I'll just stick to speaking to them on the phone. They are not very happy about what's going on. But well, there's nothing that we can do about it at this point. Update 3. Hey everyone, it has been several months since my last update, and I know I've been inactive, but I just logged in here to tell you guys that a couple of weeks back, my brother-in-law finally got his divorce finalized on his terms, and he and Hannah are officially done now. I guess technically, he's not my brother-in-law anymore, and we are not related, but we have remained friends. The fact that we have been through similar situations in the recent past has led to our friendship, and I value this. He has already moved to the suburbs with his daughter, and Hannah gets to see their daughter on the weekends according to their arrangement. She's not very happy about it, but well, there's not much that she could do about it either because he was very firm about what he wanted, and good for him, he got what he wanted, and so did I. Can't say that life has been perfect, but things are looking up for me now, and I'm even considering taking up a job out of state so I can have a change of environment. Things have changed, and I have been through a lot, but I'm looking forward to the future, so I can put everything behind me now, and I'm keeping my fingers crossed. Hopefully, this time everything will work out for the best. Now on to the next story. Story 6. My sister excluded me from her bachelorette party, then asked me to babysit. I said no, but she still dumped her kids at my door and left. You won't believe this. Shut up already. Basically, I was not invited to my sister's bachelorette party since it was for close friends only. However, she later requested me to watch her children instead. I mean, are you serious? I was nice enough to raise her children for free, but I couldn't even join in on the fun? The arrogance. To be honest, I made the decision to show her the truth. It was usually that way while I was growing up, by the way. My sister is Tiffany, and my name is Violet. Little things at the beginning. I had to share my lunch if she didn't bring it to school. I was the one who stayed up late to help her do any schoolwork that was due the following day. It was a major issue and caused problems in my home when she would have tantrums over things, and my parents would encourage me to be the bigger person and let it go. Nothing altered as we grew older. I somehow ended up being Tiffany's unofficial babysitter for her 2 young children. If I didn't have anything else to do, she would drop them off without much notice. Too bad if I had plans. I could find time if I was busy. It seems like it has been going on forever. I endured it for years. Then she became engaged. I had come to terms with the fact that I would most likely be asked to do a ton of things for her wedding. She would count on me to run errands, go dress shopping, assist with planning, and of course, keep the kids whenever she needed me. I had anticipated all of that. The bachelorette party scenario was something I wasn't expecting. I was looking through Instagram one day when I came across a post from a buddy of ours. A big group of women were celebrating and chatting about how delighted they were as it counted down to Tiffany's bachelorette vacation. Confused, I gazed at my screen. Regarding this excursion, I had not heard anything. I figured I would hear about it shortly and it was just being arranged. A couple of days went by, no invitation, not a word about it. I therefore chose to ask Tiffany. Hey, are you doing a bachelorette trip? Tiffany, oh yeah, it's just going to be a small group, only my closest friends. Best friends? Her only sister was me. Her bridal party was supposed to have included me. My response, oh, I just assumed I'd be invited. Tiffany, I didn't think you'd be into it. We're having a fun girls' weekend. I didn't want you to feel out of place, not at home. Even so, what did that mean? As soon as she saw my expression, she said, Violet, you know it's nothing personal. I just want a certain vibe, you know? I pretended to understand and nodded, but I was hurting on the inside. It hurt that she didn't even think about inviting me. Even though I didn't want to go on their trip enough to beg, I convinced myself it wasn't a huge problem and swallowed it down. She was free to throw her party. I had no intention of making a fuss over it. I assumed that would be the last of it. I was mistaken. Tiffany, who never calls unless she needs something, called me 2 days before the trip. I answered, already figuring out where this was headed. Tiffany, hey, so I have a huge favor to ask. I remained silent as I waited. Tiffany, this weekend, I need you to watch the kids. I'm in serious trouble because our sitter just canceled. She told me that her vacation was just for close friends, so I almost laughed. But now she was expecting me to drop everything and watch the kids so she could go? So I let her continue. Tiffany, it would help me so much. You know how hard it is to find a sitter at the last minute. And I know you love spending time with them. The guilt trip was there. I wanted to say no right away, but then I had an idea. So I told her I would get back to her later instead of answering her right away. And she appeared relieved. Tiffany, sis, thank you. I was sure I could rely on you. I went online and made a last-minute reservation for a beachfront resort after hanging up without making any commitments. Payback time. Tiffany called again the night before she was scheduled to depart. Tiffany said, so, we're good for tomorrow, right? I inhaled deeply and spoke in an informal tone. Oh, I forgot to text you. I actually booked a trip for myself this weekend. I won't be around to babysit. Quiet. Tiffany, wait, what? What do you mean you booked a trip? You never go anywhere. I disregarded the remark. Yeah, I figured it was time to do something fun for myself. Hope you figure things out. She began to splutter. Tiffany, but wait, what? You can't just leave. What am I supposed to do with the kids? Not sure. Maybe ask one of your close friends. As if I had slapped her, she gasped. Tiffany, oh my God, you're being so petty right now. I gave a shrug. Not trying to be, just prioritizing myself like you did. Before she could continue, I told her I had to leave. After that, I packed my bags, switched off my phone's notifications, and went to bed. I woke up early the following morning, packed my belongings, and headed out. My phone began to explode with voicemails, missed calls, and angry texts as I was on the beach sipping champagne and listening to the waves. The initial one, Tiffany, where are you? I'm at your house. The following, Tiffany said, you said you'd help me. Then Janice, my mother, called. I let the voicemail go. Then she called repeatedly. At last, I responded. Mother, Violet, Tiffany is outside your house with the kids. What is going on? I sipped my beverage. My response, I told her I wouldn't be home. I have my own plans this weekend. Mama, wait, so she expected you to babysit? Yep, without even asking me first. Quiet. Then Mom, I see. I didn't get a shout from her. She didn't point out my selfishness to me. She also sounded, for the first time in her life, weary of Tiffany's actions. That's wonderful to hear. My phone is still vibrating on the table as I sit by the ocean and watch the sunset. Tiffany is still yelling and calling me nonstop outside my house. I'm not sure if I should respond after I finished my drink. Perhaps. After a few minutes of silence, my phone began to ring again. But this time it wasn't Tiffany. It was my dad, Richard. My dad never calls unless something serious is happening. I sighed, picked it up, and braced myself. I sat there watching the waves roll in, feeling the warm breeze on my face. The sound of the ocean drowned out the buzzing of my phone, but I could still see the notifications piling up. "Where are you?" asked Dad. I could detect the sharpness in his tone, even though his voice was quiet. "Me, on the shore, taking a rest." "Dad, Tiffany and the children are crying in front of your house. She claims that you left them behind." I took a deep breath and closed my eyes. "Me, I didn't leave anyone behind. I never consented to be a babysitter." "Dad, she had plans this weekend, as you are aware. She required your assistance. I was expected to constantly step up, no matter what. And there it was, the standard speech. Me, I was not invited on her trip. I was close enough to be her free babysitter, but she didn't think I was close enough to be there. Number not now." Dad was silent for a while. "Father, I understand that you're upset, but family takes care of each other." I gave a little chuckle. "Me, is Tiffany looking after me? Has she ever? Or am I simply supposed to give up everything for her at any time?" More silence, followed by an unexpected development. "Father, your mother and I are on our way to get the kids." I straightened my posture in my chair. "Me, you're heading to Tiffany's house? Hold on." "No, your house," said Dad. After leaving the children there, she departed. Anger began to slowly swell in my breast. Tiffany had left her children outside my house, thinking that someone, anybody, would watch them. She had not made other plans or recruited another babysitter. So she simply left them there and went. I took another sip of my drink while clenching my jaw. "Me, how long ago?" "Dad, roughly 20 minutes. I'm already halfway there with your mom." She truly believed that I would give in, that I would go home in a panic and accept responsibility, like I always did. But this time, I let out a sharp breath. "Me, all okay. Tell me when you get them." After hanging up, I tried to calm myself by staring out at the water and thinking about how horrible it was for the kids, who didn't deserve this and didn't know their mother was using them as pawns in some absurd guilt trip. I thought about calling Tiffany, but I knew what she would say. She would play the victim, turn this around on me, and tell everyone that I was the selfish, cruel sister who made her leave her kids on a doorstep because she had no other option. It wasn't worth it. My dad texted me 15 minutes later, saying, "Dad, we have them." I released a breath I didn't know I was holding. And then he contacted me again, saying, "Dad, we're taking them to our house." My mom, Janice, had always found ways to make things better for Tiffany, but something about this had pushed her over the edge. "Your mother is furious." That made me stop. Mom was furious? That was new. Before I could give it much thought, another message arrived, this time from Tiffany. "How could you do that to me?" asked Tiffany. I rolled my eyes and continued to read. "But now I had the problem," Tiffany replied. "You know I had nowhere else to go." "What else was I supposed to do?" asked Tiffany. "Tiffany, you really are making a big deal out of a trip. You're self-centered and petty." And last, the message, "You're dead to me," said Tiffany. This wasn't over yet, but I wasn't going to let her spoil my weekend. So I locked my phone and put it away after staring at the screen for a moment. As I reclined on my lounge chair, I allowed Tiffany's irate text to remain unread. Everything was bathed in rich orange and gold hues as the sun descended over the ocean. The waves were calm, steady, and rhythmic. Something bothered me even though I should have been at ease. Tiffany wasn't one to take things lightly. She was always adept at assigning blame and manipulating circumstances to her advantage, and this was the kind of thing she would cling to for years. I let out a sigh, sipped my drink slowly, then picked up my phone once more. 42 messages remained unread. Some from my mother, most from Tiffany. I started by quickly reading Mom's most recent text. Mother, we have the kids. Mother, Tiffany isn't answering our calls. Mama, call me when you can. I scowled. Why wasn't Tiffany responding to them? She kept sending me texts, but was she ignoring them? That was nonsensical. After a moment of hesitation, I clicked on her name. The texts were just what I had anticipated. Tiffany said, I hope you're happy. You ruined everything. Tiffany said, you're so bitter. It's disgusting. Tiffany said, you embarrassed me in front of everyone. Tiffany said, I hope you're enjoying yourself while I'm falling apart. Nothing fresh. The standard guilt-tripping. A new message appeared just as I was ready to put my phone away once more. Tiffany said, I told my friends what you did. They all agree you're an awful sister. No wonder you don't have many close friends. I gave a quick breath. It was there. Throughout my entire life, I had been the trustworthy, responsible, and good sibling. I had to be the bigger person, and Tiffany was used to that. She had to make me the bad guy now that I wasn't going out of my way for her. I put my phone away and locked it. Allow her to provide her version. I didn't give a damn. I believed I didn't anyhow. My phone buzzed once more about an hour later, right as I was wrapping up supper at the resort's outdoor eatery. I let out a sigh, anticipating more irate texts. It wasn't Tiffany, though. My neighbor was the one. Your neighbor, hey, are you home? There's someone banging on your front door. I felt sick to my stomach. I instantly typed back, who is it? I exclaimed. Your neighbor. I think it's Tiffany. She's yelling your name. She was, of course. I tightened my jaw. Tiffany was at my house, most likely prepared to yell at me face to face after realizing that our parents wouldn't give in as they normally did. Me, I'm not in the city. Neighbor, she is unhappy about that, yes? You want me to do what? I inhaled deeply. Ignore her, I say. She's waking up the entire street, says the neighbor. Rachel was obviously dramatic, but this was something different. What was she trying to do? Make a scene and get me to go home quickly? If that was her goal, it wouldn't work. So I rubbed my temples. After 15 minutes, my dad sent me another SMS. Dad, Tiffany just arrived at our house and is requesting that the children return. I scowled, since it didn't make sense that she had left them there, gone away, and disregarded their calls before demanding their return. Next, another text. Something's wrong. Dad, she's acting weird. Tiffany was a lot of things, but she wasn't reckless with her children. She was entitled and manipulative, but she was also strategic. If she abandoned them, it was to make a point. But now that she was going back, something wasn't right. My phone then buzzed once more, this time with a message from my neighbor. Tiffany left, her neighbor, but about 5 minutes later, a man came looking for her. My stomach turned over. What guy? I asked. The tall, somewhat rough-looking neighbor knocked a few times, glanced around, and then walked away. Tiffany only surrounded herself with individuals who could help her in some manner. She didn't date guys like that. Who is this person, and why was he looking for her? I gazed at my phone, feeling my pulse quicken. I went back to Tiffany's previous message, which read, Tiffany, I hope you're having fun while I'm falling apart. Tiffany was erratic, but this time she had gone from angry to desperate in a matter of hours. She had abandoned her children, then demanded their return, and now some random guy was showing up at my house looking for her. I had thought she was just being dramatic, but now I wasn't sure, and I couldn't get rid of the feeling that something wasn't right. My instinct told me that I couldn't ignore this, so I contacted Tiffany, something I hadn't done in years. Despite my best efforts to ignore it and enjoy my weekend, she didn't respond. Voicemail. When I tried again, I debated while staring at my phone, and then I called my dad, who answered right away. Me? She just left you? Dad. What took place? Dad sighed. She suddenly appeared and demanded that the children be returned. Until she clarified the situation, your mother told her no. Tiffany snapped, yelling, sobbing, and declaring our collective opposition to her. Me, did she explain her initial reason for leaving them? Dad, not at all. However, she insisted that she needed to make a change before it was too late. I clenched my fingers around my phone. Me, did she mention the issue she needed to resolve? Dad, no. She also forbade me from calling the police. She claimed to be in control of it. I checked the time and it was late, but I had a bad feeling this wasn't finished, and I was right. That didn't seem like Tiffany, who always made sure others saw her as the victim and would call the police if she had any reason to do so. My mom called at around 2 o'clock in the morning, and I answered right away when I heard my phone vibrate noisily on the nightstand. Me, what's the matter, Mom? Mom, Tiffany is back at our place, and that individual is as well. I leaped from my bed. Me, what? Did he follow her there? Mom, yes, outside. They are arguing. I quickly put on my clothes, picked up my bag, and hurried to leave the resort. Me, make a police call, Mom. Mom, Tiffany keeps warning us not to, but your father did it already. I was already in the vehicle and driving quickly on the freeway. My response, I'm coming home. Mom, what? Don't, please. I had already hung up, though, since I needed to see for myself that Tiffany had pulled our entire family into whatever problem she was in. One of the officers was standing between them, attempting to defuse the situation, and I parked and got out, feeling my heart pound in my chest. By the time I pulled up to our parents' house, 2 police cars were outside, and Tiffany was sobbing hysterically on the front porch while the man, whom I could now see clearly, was pacing on the sidewalk and shouting something at her. He was tall, rough-looking, and angry, and I didn't recognize him. Mom hurried over when she first seen me. Mom, you weren't supposed to arrive too late, I said. I glanced at the man, then at Tiffany. Me, who's that? Mom gave a headshake. Parents, we don't know. I looked at Tiffany. Me, who's that, Tiffany? Tiffany wouldn't give me a look. Instead, the man turned to face me. Man, you're the sister, aren't you? The one who abandoned her. I was taken aback and retreated. Me, pardon me. Mocking voice of a man. I need a weekend to myself. I don't have time to help my own sister. My blood froze. Me, did you mention me to him, Tiffany? The man chuckled, but Tiffany refused to look at me. Man, she did, of course. She put the responsibility on you, said that she was stranded in this dilemma because of you. I tightened my jaw. What mess? I asked myself. Man, the money. The ground seemed to have been torn out from under me. Me, how much money? The man snorted. Male, the $10,000 she owes me. My heart ceased, and I looked at Tiffany. My response, tell me he's lying, Tiffany. Tiffany's eyes were bloodshot and her face was pallid when she finally looked up. Tiffany, she whispered. For the wedding, I needed the money. I gazed at her. Me, you took out a loan from him? Why? She shook her head and wiped her cheeks. Tiffany said, I thought I could pay it back before he came looking. The man chuckled once again. Guy, yeah, well, you thought wrong. I looked back at him. So you're a loan shark? I asked. Male, I prefer businessman. I took a deep breath. Me, what did you think? Would you get paid more quickly if you came here and caused a scene? He gave a shrug. Man, I couldn't get her to return my calls. Her excuses ran out. So here we are. I gave Tiffany another glance. Me, you left the kids in my house for what reason? Tiffany sobbed while covering her face. According to Tiffany, I didn't want them to be around if things got bad. I shut my eyes. She had taken advantage of me, tried to have me watch children so she could deal with a loan shark behind my back, and then abandon them anyway. She had put us all in danger because she didn't want to be held accountable for her own behavior. I was done. After obtaining statements, the police ultimately escorted the man away. Our parents weren't amenable to Tiffany's attempts at apology. Father, you put your kids in danger, Tiffany. Mama, You put all of us in danger. Your mother and you tried to blame your sister for your mistake." Tiffany continued to cry, stating that she was at a loss for what to do. Silently, I stood there. I had no feelings. I had lost my anger. I wasn't shocked at all. I was simply worn out. My response: "Figure it out, Tiffany." Her eyes were big as she gazed up at me. "You're just going to walk away?" asked Tiffany. Me? Yes. I didn't feel compelled to make things right for her. For the first time in my life, this mess was her fault. It would need to be cleaned by her. I turned, made my way back to my vehicle, and departed. For weeks, Tiffany and I didn't communicate. Later, I learned that in order to pay off the debt, my parents made her sell some of her wedding treasures. Although it was far smaller than she had initially intended, the wedding still took place. The bridal party did not include me. They didn't even invite me, and to be honest, I didn't mind that. I prioritized myself for the first time in my life. Now on to the next story. Story 7. My parents funded my sister's lavish wedding, then handed me the bill. They never expected what I'd do next. I, 32M, was my parents' first kid. They own a healthcare firm and were both highly involved, so I was effectively parentless throughout my youth. I had few intimate moments with them and was always in the care of my nannies. My parents, still in their prime, opted not to bear the responsibility of parenting. They lived a luxury lifestyle, frequently spending over their means, but because they each had sizable inheritances as a safe net, they always landed securely despite their spendthrift tendencies. My parents had a daughter, Emma, 8 years after my birth. With Emma's arrival, I realized that their neglect of me was not due to their busy lifestyle, but because they just did not like me enough to spend time with me. Over the years, I discovered numerous causes for this treatment. I was a normal-looking child with average intelligence, an introvert who only spoke when spoken to. Emma, on the other hand, was just what my parents needed to position themselves as a perfect family in their professional circles. She was a stunning baby with blue eyes and curly golden hair. She had inherited my parents' greatest qualities, and even as a youngster, she could fascinate a small crowd with her antics. Her presence solidified the perfect family picture that my parents desired to project. Emma had special treatment, but this did not imply that I had a difficult existence. I was fortunate enough to attend an expensive private school and then a prestigious university. However, the maltreatment I experienced throughout my upbringing taught me the value of working hard and earning respect. I worked tirelessly in school and university to earn a well-paying position. Once I secured a job, I worked hard to go up the professional ladder as rapidly as possible. Despite maintaining communication with my parents, the wounds of childhood maltreatment never healed. Emma, as the golden child, was never expected by our parents to work hard. She was an ordinary student to begin with, and because our parents indulged her, she constantly failed her studies. She dropped out of high school, but our parents continued to employ her at their business. Even yet, she was absent most days, and when she did show up, she stayed for only a few hours. She had disagreements with all of her coworkers, and they loathed her presence in the office. Friends and family frequently told me about Emma's temper tantrums and the drama that ensued. However, it devastated my heart how my parents kept this from me. During a visit to my parents after I had established my career, I expected to have a serious conversation with Emma on their behalf. I believed a family intervention would benefit her professional life. When I arrived, Emma was nowhere to be found, and my parents made me feel foolish by stating she ran half of their firm. I could tell my parents were gently comparing my accomplishments to Emma's. That's when it hit me. My parents saw me as the child that grew up without their meddling, whereas Emma was the one they reared with their guidance. It would have been a shame for my parents if I had achieved more in life than Emma. At 19, I was already succeeding in university, whilst my sister, who was the same age, was out partying. Nothing changed throughout the years. Emma remained to live with our parents while I grew in my job. My relationship with Emma deteriorated during these years for reasons I did not fully understand. As her older brother, I attempted to comprehend what she was going through. Everyone except our parents contrasted her life to mine. She was continually told to follow in my footsteps and achieve success, but that was not her goal. These parallels compelled our parents to overcompensate by giving her undeserved advancements in their company and giving in to all of her demands. My sister was growing up without the ability to accept responsibility for anything, which concerned me. However, I had no role in her life to intervene and advise her. My parents had already kicked me out of their lives since I outshone Emma at parties and family gatherings. Emma preferred it this way, so I established my own social group in the city where I lived. 2 years ago, I met my wife, Danielle. Danielle worked in the fashion sector, something I never envisioned myself being involved with. I had the worst fashion sense, and I still don't understand how a woman with such refined taste and fashion fell in love with me. Her presence in my life enhanced how I portrayed myself, improving my confidence. Strangely, the emptiness left by my parents, which had persisted since my early youth, has finally been filled. Danielle's presence in my life allowed me to discover aspects of my personality that I was previously unaware of, so it's not an exaggeration to state that she's the best thing that's ever happened to me. After a year of dating, Danielle and I decided to marry. Because we both had a limited circle of close friends and family, we chose to have a lavish ceremony. We planned a destination wedding and, after much study, debate, and discussion, chose Venice as our site. I won't go into detail about the wedding, but we paid for all of our invited guests' travel fees and hosted them in the best possible hotels. Most of our guests had never experienced a ceremony like this before. Emma urged me to purchase a ticket for her boyfriend as well, which I joyfully agreed to despite Danielle's advice to hesitate. Throughout the wedding, I detected jealousy in Emma's eyes. She was frequently consoled by our mother. My parents were in awe of the wedding I had planned, but they kept their joy to themselves. Even before the wedding, my family had ignored my attempts to arrange a family dinner with Danielle. They maintained this conduct even after the wedding. After a while, I gave up trying. Around the same time, I realized that my parents were bad-mouthing me to those around them. They informed others that I had taken their money to finish my studies and find a career, just to abandon them in their old age. My father even stated that he would not leave me a dime of his fortune. My aunt on my father's side, who has always supported me, was nice enough to warn me about what was going on at home. It would be a lie to claim that it did not hurt me. Losing a family member is a difficult experience, and Danielle helped me get through it. I learned a few months back that my sister was arranging her wedding. My aunt told me that Emma was blown away by my wedding and wanted something similar for herself. She even convinced her fiancé to propose to her and began organizing a lavish wedding in Tuscany. However, neither she nor her lover had any money, so she approached our parents and requested them to pay for her wedding. To no one's surprise, they cheerfully approved her request. However, they could not afford a wedding in Tuscany, so they requested her to change the location to Hawaii. After considerable opposition, my sister gave in and planned an elaborate wedding there. Throughout the preparation process, neither my parents nor my sister wanted to involve me in any way. I even met them once during this time, but they kept quiet about the wedding plans. So, I accepted the fact that I wouldn't be invited to my sister's wedding. My parents surprised me a few weeks ago when they invited Danielle and me to supper at their house. This was the first time they had asked Danielle around, so my unsophisticated mind assumed this was the first step toward repairing my connection with them. The dinner was good, but afterward, my folks dropped a bombshell. They informed me that they had incurred significant business losses and that an anticipated litigation loomed over their heads like the sword of Damocles. They could no longer afford my sister's wedding. They also couldn't let their golden child down, so they invited me over to see if I could help fund the expense of her wedding. The dinner was not an attempt to reconcile our differences. Rather, it was an opportunity for them to utilize me to make their favorite child happy. I was enraged on the inside, but without asking Danielle, I accepted their offer. However, I had two conditions. First and foremost, I wanted complete control over the wedding style. Second, I wanted to give a speech at the wedding. They were startled because I wasn't normally the one to offer speeches. They didn't care as long as I helped them maintain the prestige of their favored child. Emma's wedding was far more crowded than my own. In addition to her acquaintances, family members from both sides of our parents' families were invited. This was an excellent opportunity to express myself, which is why I insisted on giving a speech. The wedding day eventually arrived, and I could tell Emma was unsatisfied with the arrangements I had made. We had extremely different interests, and I knew that whatever I selected, she would find a way to perceive it as a bad decision. But I was there for one reason, to deliver my speech. When the time came, I asked Danielle to videotape it. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said, "I want to take a moment to thank my parents for giving me the opportunity to speak today." My parents exchanged confused looks. They had expected me to speak about Emma, not them. "You see, for years my parents have ignored me," I went on. "They never supported me or treated me with the same love and affection that they did my sister. But now that they need anything from me, they creep back." As my remarks took effect, the room fell silent. My parents looked uncomfortable, and Emma appeared to be about to cry. "But I'm not bitter," I added, smiling. "In fact, I am grateful. You see, this wedding has given me the opportunity to demonstrate to my parents my success and accomplishments, and I must admit, it feels quite wonderful." I went on to give a speech about how my parents treated me differently and how, despite all of my successes and accomplishments, it still hurts me. My parents sat quietly, their faces flushed with embarrassment. As I finished my speech, I approached my sister and hugged her. "I'm so happy for you," I said. "Truly, I hope you have a wonderful life with your husband." And with that, I left the reception with my wife, leaving my parents and sister behind. I drove back to my hotel room and sat here satisfied. My parents have always portrayed themselves as the ideal parents, and this is a significant part of their reputation in our town. I'm glad I finally had the chance to tell everyone how I was genuinely handled. However, I feel a little awful about doing it during my sister's wedding. Am I the a-hole for destroying my sister's wedding day by giving a speech on my parents' carelessness since childhood? Update 1. Emma entered my room shortly before midnight and hugged me tightly. She was crying, and I sobbed with her. Danielle moved out of the room to provide us some solitude. Emma told me she had never heard my side of the tale. She had always assumed that I remained aloof from my family because I desired to be. Our parents had made sarcastic remarks about me to her since she was a child, creating a terrible image of me in her mind. I apologized for ruining her wedding day. To my amazement, she was incredibly understanding, even saying that our parents deserved it. This is the most heartfelt talk I've had with my sister since she was born. Update 2. 1 week has passed. I had not met my father or mother before leaving Hawaii, but my mother called me today. She informed me that Emma had ceased speaking to my father. My speech made a significant impression on her, but my father viewed it as confrontational and disrespectful. He chose to cut all relations with me. Emma ceased talking to him after she discovered the truth. My mother begged me to act in some way because the situation was causing her distress. Update 3. Yesterday, I did something inconceivable. I invited all of the family members to supper and let them discuss their differences. After feeling orphaned and lost for the previous 32 years, I suddenly feel like I'm leading a family. During supper, I discussed my differences with my dad. Though he was too stubborn to accept his shortcomings, I knew he recognized that he had not been a good parent to me. My mother apologized for not being present for me as a mother. I did not turn out badly, so there was no reason not to forgive her. By the end of the evening, I had ensured that the conflicts between my sister and my father were settled. It is odd to be involved in family matters, but my only concern is whether this will continue or not. Comment. Ash. Your family is a bunch of rich a-holes who have been making money for generations and have no idea what to do with it. What's wrong with being raised by nannies when kids are abandoned on the streets? You were loved and cared for as a youngster, which is why you grew up to be successful and can now afford 2 expensive weddings consecutively. NTA? But you might have done this sooner rather than being a doormat for so many years hoping your family would learn from their mistakes and begin loving you properly. You should also learn to communicate more effectively rather than waiting until the last minute to explode. Now on to the next story. Story 8. My parents gave me some money and kicked me out. After my sister was born 17 years later, they want my help. I am 35 years old and employed as a software developer at a large West Coast tech company. I finally established a secure existence for myself after working in the field for almost 10 years, complete with a respectable salary, a cozy apartment, and even some future investments. I undoubtedly appear to be living the American dream from the outside. However, something that happened recently has been making me face my history, and I'm finding it difficult to deal with. After 17 years of total quiet, my parents, 60M and 58F, reached out to me and asked for my assistance with my sister, 13F. You must be aware of our past in order to comprehend the significance of this. My parents never wanted me as a youngster. Before I was born, they had been trying for a daughter for years, and they were openly disappointed to have me instead. As a child, I frequently heard my parents call me the spare or a remnant in conversations with friends or family. We weren't impoverished because my dad was a real estate agent and my mom taught high school, but they always pretended that my presence was depleting their finances. I can still clearly recall family get-togethers where family members would try to persuade my parents to be thankful for their healthy son. I learned to keep quiet during these conversations, but my parents would still say things like, "Unless it's a girl, we don't really have a child yet." My aunt would say things like, "At least he's smart and well-behaved," or, "Many couples can't have children at all." Their remarks still had a profound impact, especially during family gatherings or holidays. I began to develop a strong interest in computers and programming in middle school, using whatever resources I could find online. I would spend hours training myself to code in the school computer lab. After noticing my enthusiasm, my computer science teacher began to mentor me and even allowed me to stay after school to work on projects. However, my parents would either nod absently or shift the conversation to their ongoing efforts to have another child whenever I tried to discuss my accomplishments with them. When I was 15, everything changed. My sister was my parents' miracle child, finally born after years of trying. It was like a switch flipping in our home. When she was born, there was love, excitement, and celebration all at once, but none of it was aimed at me. They gave her everything, including their time, money, love, and attention. Although I recognized that she was their top priority, the disparity in their treatment of us was unpleasant and striking. I can still clearly recall my junior year victory in a state-level programming competition. A minor college scholarship was part of the award. My parents were so enamored with my sister's block stacking that they hardly looked up when I brought the trophy and certificate home. However, her accomplishment of stacking 3 blocks on top of one another was worthy of a cake and photo celebration with the family. I pushed myself into my academics and coding at school because I knew that education was the key to my freedom. I began working as a freelance web developer on the side, keeping the money I made hidden because I thought I might need it in the future. That intuition was correct. In retrospect, I believe my parents had been preparing this for some time. Rather than throwing a party for my 18th birthday, they sat me down for what they called an important discussion. They clarified that my sister's playroom and learning area required my room. They had already made the decision that I would go right away. They completely shut me down when I attempted to explain that I needed time to find a place and save money. They said I'd had time to get ready and should be able to handle things myself. My father gave me a $500 envelope containing what he referred to as startup money, and gave me until the weekend to depart. It happened on a Tuesday. I stuffed my laptop, some clothes, and the about $3,000 I had surreptitiously collected from my freelancing business into my old high school backpack and a few trash bags. As I packed, my sister, who was only 3 years old at the time, watched from the doorway, unable to comprehend what was going on. The initial years were harsh. While being cautious not to overstay my welcome anywhere, I couch-surfed between friends' homes. I worked a variety of jobs, including day labor at construction sites, nighttime shifts at 7-Eleven, and freelance coding whenever I could find customers. In between employment, I would spend the day sleeping at public libraries, utilizing their computers to learn new programming languages and search for better prospects. I survived on whatever was on offer at the dollar store and ramen noodles. I sometimes went to bed hungry because I wasn't sure if I would have enough money for my next meal. The worst time of year was in the winter, when I occasionally had to decide between having enough food to eat and paying for a warm place to sleep. I made an effort to stay in touch with my parents during those formative years in spite of everything. I would periodically give them a call in the hopes of seeing even the slightest indication that they were concerned about my welfare. However, they were obviously waiting for the conversation to end, and each exchange was brief and awkward. They never inquired about my needs or how I was doing. They just remarked, "That's nice," and shifted the conversation to my sister's preschool accomplishments when I told them that I was enrolled in community colleges while working. I quit trying after being the only one who reached out for 2 years. Even after I taught myself full-stack coding, they never gave me a call to see how I was doing or left a message on my birthday or on holidays. I recall being so desperate to let them know that I had arrived, but their phone had already been cut off. I learned so much about survival and independence in those first several years after being expelled. I continued to code while working several jobs. I would use my phone to study programming documentation during my breaks at the convenience shop. I would work on minor freelance assignments at the public library in between building site shifts. With free Wi-Fi, air conditioning, and most importantly, computers where I could practice coding, the library turned into my haven. When a small firm decided to hire me as a junior developer, I finally got my break. My freelance work portfolio and my contributions to open-source projects impressed them. Although the pay wasn't high by IT standards, it changed my life. I was able to buy a little studio apartment for the first time and was no longer concerned about where I would sleep every night. I pushed myself into the task, working 70-hour weeks and learning as much as I could about cloud computing, database administration, and system architecture. Like a sponge, I took it all in. After my coworkers saw how committed I was, I quickly took charge of modest initiatives. I kept working on open-source projects and creating my own apps on the weekends and at night. I had discovered something I genuinely liked doing, so it wasn't just about the money anymore. When one of the big IT corporations saw my contributions to their open-source platform, it was the true turning point. They extended an invitation for an interview, and following 6 rounds of technical interviews, I was offered a job that fundamentally altered my life. After 7 years, I am now in charge of a large project team as a senior software engineer. I have enough cash to feel secure about the future, a modern apartment in a safe building, and a solid investment portfolio. Before my father's number showed up on my phone 3 days ago, after 17 years of total silence, I believed I had finally put an end to my past. It was startling to hear his voice. His voice seemed older, almost frantic. "It couldn't wait," he added. They had to discuss my sister. I was left reeling by the discourse that ensued. "It looks like my 13-year-old sister is having a lot of problems. She frequently skips school, has been caught shoplifting several times, and hangs out with a group of older teens whom my parents disapprove of. More concerningly, she has had multiple encounters with local police authorities, and drugs have been discovered in her room twice. 3 different rehabilitation programs have already been tried on her, but none of them appear to have been successful." When my father mentioned their financial predicament, it became evident why they had called. More than $200,000 has been spent on counseling sessions, various treatment programs, and legal bills. They had sold the majority of their valuables, maxed out many credit cards, and remortgaged their home. They are in dire need of assistance and are now considering a $75,000 specialist long-term treatment center. With tears in her eyes, my mother called and said they had nowhere else to go. The phrase "family needs to stick together" and the fact that I am their only chance to save my sister were repeated by her. I was struck by the irony of hearing these remarks from the same folks who expelled me when I was 18 and never looked back. When I was sleeping in my car in between couchsurfing arrangements, where was this sense of family unity? On all those evenings when I went to bed hungry, where was it? In addition to aid with their credit card debt and mortgage payments, they are requesting support with the costs of the treatment program. They require over $100,000 in total. If I couldn't give the entire money right away, my father even recommended that we arrange a payment schedule. To be honest, if I wanted to, I could assist them. I have a secure financial situation thanks to years of frugal living and wise investing. However, I feel physically uncomfortable at the idea of granting them access to my finances. I acquired this money by working hard and making sacrifices for years, frequently going without food and housing while learning to code. I can't sleep at night because of how complicated this scenario is. Since my sister is only a child, I feel bad for even considering helping. She never requested to be born into this mess, and perhaps things would have turned out differently if someone had supported me when I was a teenager. However, I then recall how my parents handled me, how they dismissed me without question, and never once inquired about my whereabouts for 17 years. They contacted again yesterday, requesting a face-to-face meeting. They claimed to want to make amends and provide an explanation for everything. They offered to drive the 4 hours to visit me and proposed that we meet at a fancy restaurant in my neighborhood. Their zeal unnerves me in some way, as if they're making an excessive effort to sway events to their advantage. According to my partner, 34F, I should set clear limits. She has personally witnessed the amount of effort I have put into rebuilding my life and getting over my childhood trauma. She fears that allowing my parents to return could reverse years of emotional growth. Although he thinks I owe my parents nothing, my best buddy, who let me sleep on his sofa during those difficult early years, advises me to think about assisting my sister directly if I so choose. I'm totally conflicted right now. My rational side tells me to keep the distance that has helped me succeed. My parents still view me as a resource to be utilized rather than a beloved son. Thus, they haven't changed. Their true motivations are evident from the way they are handling this matter, concentrating on the money rather than trying to make atonement for the past. However, my emotional side keeps thinking about my sister, a disturbed adolescent who may be misbehaving due to the same poisonous familial dynamics from which I fled. By refusing to assist, am I sustaining the abandoning cycle? Or would aiding merely make my parents' manipulation possible? Those terrifying evenings spent sleeping in my car taught me to never take for granted the life I've worked so hard to create. I feel like I'm being pulled back into the craziness that I've been trying to avoid for years. Should I assist them and run the danger of being manipulated again? Do I make an effort to assist my sister directly? Or should I continue to set the boundaries that have helped me recover and grow? I'm sure I'll question any decision I choose. I might be angry with them for dragging me back in if I assist. I could always question whether I could have changed my sister's life if I didn't. This decision is weighing me down and I could really use some outside insight. Update 1. I chose to meet my folks at a downtown coffee shop after reading your advice and comments. I reasoned that being in a public setting would help maintain decorum and provide me with a convenient way to leave if necessary. I was immediately struck by how much they had aged when I first saw them enter. In addition to having black circles under their eyes and a lot more gray hair than I could recall, they were worn out. They didn't take long to delve into specifics. It seems that my sister's problems are more serious than they first said over the phone. She has had to attend several rehabilitation programs, all of which they have had to pay for out of pocket. In addition to her substance abuse and legal issues, she hasn't gone to a full week of classes in months, so she's not just missing school periodically. She frequently slips out with individuals who are obviously a bad influence, frequently going missing for days at a time. My parents weren't lying to me about their financial circumstances. They showed me their phone records. To pay for these costs, they have sold the majority of their prized assets, including the house I grew up in. They are currently having financial difficulties and live in a tiny apartment. According to their estimates, they will only be able to survive for a few more months if they sell some family artifacts. I felt uneasy because of this underlying expectation that pervaded our talk. My duty as their son to assist them was one of the family obligations they constantly brought up. They seemed to assume that just because we are related, I would step up, regardless of what they had done in the past. It was evident from the way they spoke that they hadn't really acknowledged their previous treatment or truly digested how they had wronged me. I could feel all of my previous hatred and rage rising as they continued. None of this was their fault, in their opinion. They dismissed my expulsion at the age of 18, claiming it was just parenting and that they had acted in the best interests of the family at the time. They behaved as though their treatment of me was entirely appropriate. They now expected me to overlook everything and intervene to solve their issues. I came to see that they were seeking a solution, not understanding or forgiveness, and my money was that solution. To them, I was their final option because they needed someone to shoulder the financial load of all the choices they had made over the years. I listened to what they had to say before firmly telling them that I was unable to assist them. I clarified that when they abandoned me, I had put a lot of effort into starting a life on my own, and that I was no longer in a position to help them, either morally or emotionally. I was clear that I didn't feel obligated to get them out of a situation that they had established for themselves. My refusal was not well received by them at all. Their tone altered entirely, and their expressions hardened. They accused me of being callous for not assisting my sister, branded me selfish, and claimed that I was leaving my family. Their eyes were filled with disappointment and rage, which I could see. It reminded me of my early years. Nothing had changed. They continued attempting to use guilt to make me feel as though I owed them money. I was more conflicted as I left that meeting than when I arrived. I feel somewhat relieved that I defended myself and established boundaries. However, another part of me feels bad, as if I'm abandoning them when they're at their lowest. It's difficult to describe, but it seems weird to leave them in this way, even if I know they profoundly wounded me. I can't stop thinking about my sister, whom I don't even know, and their predicament. Although I'm sorry for her, I don't think I can help her. It hurts to know that even after all these years, my parents still only regard me as a tool to solve their problems, rather than as a unique person with a life and challenges of my own. It's difficult for me to let go of the guilt. Is it wrong of me to persist with my choice? Should I have looked for a compromise? I can't stop reliving the encounter in my head, questioning whether I made the proper decision. Update 2. Since my last post, which was only a week ago, things have gotten even more bizarre. Only a few hours earlier, I got a call from an unfamiliar number. I heard my sister's voice for the first time when I responded. I was completely unprepared for this. I only have hazy memories of her from when she was a newborn, just before I moved out. The call got off to an unexpectedly good start considering what I had heard about her behavior. I was surprised to hear a courteous, almost pleasant voice. She started by requesting that I assist our parents with their present financial predicament. It was evident that she had practiced this pitch because she was making a big deal out of how they were having trouble and how I could save the family. I made an effort to respond politely but firmly, stating that I had to make the best choices for myself because of the complexity of my connection with our parents. Everything changed at that point. Her attitude changed abruptly. In a matter of seconds, she switched from being courteous to becoming enraged, accusing me of being self-centered and leaving her to handle our parents' problems. She said I had always been envious of her and insisted that I was abandoning my family. She said I was being arrogant since I had left and begun living on my own, whereas they had been my backers the entire time. I was stunned by what she said. They had a hauntingly familiar sound, as if she were repeating something she had heard countless times. She talked about my assistance with such arrogance, as though she really thought I had a duty to intervene and make everything right. I was so shocked that I was unable to react. I was being forced to make up for years of decisions I had nothing to do with by this person I had never dated. She hung up before I had a chance to comprehend her emotional outburst. I tried to make sense of everything as I sat there looking at my phone. What was the source of this animosity? Why did she believe I had left her? I required clarification. I was determined to find out what was happening, so I called my folks. I immediately questioned them whether they had been telling my sister that I had left them and her behind when they first picked up the phone. After a revealing silence, they eventually came clean. They had been giving my sister an entirely distorted explanation for my departure for years. They informed her that they had severed their relationship with her out of spite and that I couldn't bear to share their attention with a younger sibling. I was portrayed as a conceited older brother who left the family because I was envious of her. They had completely removed from their story the fact that they had made me feel alienated from the day she was born and expelled me as soon as I became 18. It was as if someone had taken my breath away. My sister has grown up thinking that I was the bad guy in this tale. Given that she had been fed misinformation about who I was and why I left, it's no wonder she felt as though I had abandoned her. She had been carefully kept in the dark about the fact that my parents had made me feel unwelcome from birth and had evicted me from the house. That realization caused me to hang up on them. Although it has just been a few hours since our previous talk, they haven't made another attempt to get in touch. I'm upset with my parents for misrepresenting me to my sister and giving her the impression that I abandoned her. But I'm also upset with my sister for snapping at me and demanding my assistance as though I owed it to her. It's difficult to get rid of this resentment, but I'm also experiencing a new form of guilt. I wish my parents had been honest with her about my reasons for leaving. Perhaps my relationship with my sister would have been different if they had. Although I might not have been able to provide financial support to my parents, I could have developed a relationship with my sister and perhaps helped her steer clear of some of these behavioral problems. Now, though it seems impossible to repair the harm, even whether I want to try is up in the air. My family returned in the worst conceivable way just when I thought I was done with them forever, which makes the whole scenario tiring. It's not that easy for me, even if a lot of commenters have advised me to simply ban my parents and move on. Whatever you want to call me, this is still family, and I believe that I should at least be aware of what's happening. Even though I'm in no position to provide financial support for my family, I can't help but notice that this is the first time they've contacted me. Nevertheless, I can see that my sister is too engrossed in their version of events to see things any other way, and my parents are still attempting to control the situation to achieve their goals. I'm at a loss on what to do. I can't get rid of the sense that any decision I make will be the wrong one. I'm even more convinced that keeping my distance is the proper decision after the way they've misrepresented the reasons for my departure. I feel bad for my sister, though. Her conduct and relationships are obviously being impacted by the skewed perspective of her family history that she was raised with. I wonder if this damage can be fixed or if it's best to leave it alone. Update 3. Since my last update, which was a few months ago, I've had plenty of time to think things through and let things calm down. It's been quieter for me, to be honest, but only because I choose to avoid the mess my sister and parents had produced. I'm coming to realize that sometimes taking a step back and avoiding letting their drama take over my life is the greatest way to achieve serenity. My parents gave me another call about a month after I had last provided an update. I wanted to hear what they had to say, so even though I was dreading it, I picked up. They were even more desperate this time, and they accused me of being dishonest in order to get money from me. They described the dreadful situation, how they were in danger of losing everything, and how they wanted me to intervene and make things right. The guilt trip about family is supposed to stick together was their first attempt. When that failed, they resorted to threats, claiming that if I didn't assist them, they would ruin my life. They then claimed that I was their only hope, changing their strategy once more. To be honest, I felt disgusted. They continued to threaten me in spite of everything that had transpired, and they never once stopped to admit how poorly they had treated me. I refused to back down and reiterated that I was unable to provide them with financial support and that I was not responsible for solving their issues. I reminded them that I wasn't responsible for cleaning up the mess they had made. These decisions, of course, did not make them pleased. For the next month, they continued to phone, alternating between threats and guilt trips. They eventually stopped phoning. I assumed they had finally come to the conclusion that I would not give in. I didn't hear back from them for a month, and to be honest, I thought that might be it. However, I received another call around a week ago. I nearly didn't answer, but my curiosity won out. Things had only deteriorated. They informed me that they needed to file for bankruptcy. They were essentially starting over with nothing after selling nearly all they owned to pay off their debts. They then revealed even more shocking detail. My sister had moved in with one of her friends and had severed all ties with them. Even though she is just 13, she managed to move in with a friend's family who my parents claim tolerates her misbehavior. They said it was best that my sister left them because they could no longer see themselves supporting her when I questioned why they didn't call the police. In a sense, they have also abandoned their second child. They initially attempted to place the blame on me. They claimed that none of this would have occurred if I had simply assisted them when they requested it. They said that everything went south because of me. Naturally, they were unable to acknowledge their own responsibility for their acts. I was furious. I bluntly told them that their actions and how they had treated me were to blame for everything that was happening to them. I brought up the topics of how they treated me like a second-class person in my own house, how they neglected me when I needed them, and how they expelled me when I reached 18. I informed them that they continued to try to place the responsibility on me while ignoring the fact that that had an impact on me. At that point, they began to retreat and eventually ceased making excuses. They expressed regret for everything they had done to me and offered an apology. They expressed to me their wish that they had acted differently. They seemed to be saying everything that needed to be said, but it was too late. In addition to the fact that they had ruined my sister's and my own lives, I couldn't simply ignore how they had treated me for years. They were now suffering the repercussions of their decision to push me away. I must admit that I felt sorry for them, but I also realized that I couldn't risk the life I had created for myself in an attempt to mend what was already damaged. I informed them that I needed to keep my distance and that I was unable to assist. Despite their displeasure, I stood by my choice. I was still upset with them for what they had done to me after I hung up. However, I felt sorry for them at the same time. It's too late now, but I wish they had taken the time to realize what they were doing incorrectly when they had the chance. I've come to terms with the fact that I can't save them, and I'm learning to accept that. I have no idea what the future holds for my sister or them. I just know that I won't let their errors disturb my tranquility. They can't drag me back into their mess. I've come too far. I have much more important things to worry about right now, but maybe in the future, I'll try to get in touch with my sister once more to see if I can assist her get back on track. All I can do is hope she takes this lesson to heart and makes wiser decisions than our parents did. That's about it for me then. I won't be checking in on my family for a very long time. Even though I'm aware that this isn't the best conclusion, I've come to terms with it. I sincerely appreciate all of your guidance and encouragement over this trip. It has enabled me to remain steadfast in my choices. Now on to the next story. Story 9. My broke best friend refused a job at my restaurant, saying, "Being a server is low and not respectable." This happened just before. My friend is broke. He hasn't worked in over a year. He's running out of savings and has even had to ask his parents to support him. I asked him many times why he doesn't try to get a job that's not in his field. He's got a computer science degree but has never worked in the field a single day in his life since graduating. He's turned down lots of jobs for reasons. They don't pay him enough. They won't give him a higher-up position right off the bat, etc. I'm well aware he's deluded in that sense, but he has many other good qualities, and that's why I love the guy. So, since graduating, the only job he's done is share marketing, something like online investing in Forex. He said he made about $20 a day and that it was enough for him. He's single, lives in a shared house, and doesn't spend much. Whatever makes him happy, right? The thing is, he's totally broke. I don't think he really is making even $20 a day on the shares because he's run out of money. He's stressed out and won't stop complaining about money problems. This is confusing for me, and I think it comes down to his pride not allowing him to get a job that's not fit for his ego. Now, I work as a server in a very nice restaurant and have offered him a job as a server many times. I have a great relationship with my boss, and after telling him my friend's situation, he didn't hesitate to say he wanted to help and would like to offer him a full-time job. My friend has been turning it down for months without really giving much of an explanation. Today, he called me saying his parents have cut him off and asked to borrow money from me. I said that, as a personal rule, I do not lend money to anyone, but that he was welcome to start working tomorrow with me. He again turned down the offer, and I got a bit frustrated because I'm offering him a solution to his money problem, but he won't accept it. So we got into a bit of a banter, and he finally confessed. He thinks being a server is low and doesn't get you people's respect. I told him respect is earned by getting off your ass and doing whatever you have to make ends meet. I asked him if he thinks I'm low, and he backpedaled, saying he didn't mean I in particular was low, but the job itself was. He then straight out told me, "Nobody can respect me working as a waiter in my 30s. Wow. To be honest, I'm pretty upset he thinks I am low for working as a server. I got a degree too, but I couldn't find a job in my field, so I had to take the first job I could. I'm not some prissy prick thinking I'm too good to serve others. I take pride in being a waiter and doing a great job. I'm so hurt by his comments. Why is he my friend if he thinks I'm low?" I didn't want to say something nasty or get into an argument with him, so I only told him he was being very offensive and I felt like he needed time to think about what he said to me. He replied saying there was nothing to think about, then gave me a list of low jobs like street sweeper, cleaner, etc., and said, "It's a fact those are low, not respected jobs." I asked him to apologize before this snowballed into a full-blown argument, and he said he stood by what he said. I don't want to overreact, but I don't know if we can keep being friends after this. I really don't know what to do. I don't want to badmouth him, but he should examine his life and learn empathy. I'm a very easygoing and forgiving person, but what he said hurt me and was idiotic. The man who refuses to work is calling me low. I don't know what to do. TLDR, friend is broke. I offered him a job in a restaurant, but he turned it down, saying it is low and not a well-respected job. Top comments. Comment 1. Honestly, be happy he didn't take the job, because with that attitude he wouldn't have lasted long and tarnished your rep with it. I don't want to overreact, but I don't know if we can keep being friends after this. Honestly, don't keep him as a friend. Doesn't seem that you get much out of the friendship anyway. Comment 2. Funny. Pontius Ass is too good to work as a waiter but isn't above asking to borrow money from a waiter because he's too pathetic to go earn a living to take care of himself. It's easy. Take the job off the table because it's not appreciated or respected by him, and it will only end bad for you and your generous boss. Don't lend your friend anything and let him figure out his problems on his own. Simple life lesson coming. Update November 24th, 2018. Next day. I made this post yesterday asking for advice on how to handle the situation with my friend. Basically, he's very broke and his parents have cut him off. I've been offering him a job in the restaurant I work in for months, and he always turned it down. His situation got so bad he came to me yesterday asking to borrow money. I don't lend money to anyone as a rule, but I told him there'll always be a plate of food for him in my house, and he was welcome to accept the job offer and start working with me the very next day. Well, long story short, we had a bit of an argument, if you can call it that, and he finally confessed he thinks being a server is low and won't earn him people's respect. In an interesting turn of events, he called me today and said he'd thought it through and had decided he's willing to accept the job, only with one condition, as if he was the one doing me the favor, that he's to be made manager right off the bat and that he should move in with me so that I can drive him to work, because the bus from his house to my workplace takes 35 minutes and that's over an hour of commuting a day. He then suggested I move my youngest daughter into my elder daughter's room so that there's an empty bedroom for him in my house. So he obviously had given this some thought. I was dumbfounded. The sense of entitlement and the level of pride you got to have to make those demands is astonishing. I know he's never had a proper job, but he's not stupid. He has to know you can't be made manager if you don't even know the names of their dishes or how to serve a coffee. It's all about his pride. He's got an ego bigger than I thought. He can't be humble enough to accept a waiter job and work things out from there. He needs to be made manager so that it won't hurt his pride as much. To be honest, I was so out of words I said I don't want to talk and hung up. I can't explain how off-putting that conversation was. I feel repulsed by him. I feel disgusted, as if something has changed inside me. I can't have a person like him in my life. What makes a person refuse all help just out of sheer pride? My wife says I've been patient and kind enough to him throughout the years, and I should let him figure things out on his own. He really is broke. Before his parents cut him off, they were covering his rent, bills, and he survived on the $20 a day he claimed to be making investing in Forex. I know he barely eats and can't even afford a new pair of shoes and some other stuff. I know he's got no money, but then why won't he accept the job? He's not shy, has no mental health issues, and has no problem dealing with people. He's refused many other jobs in the past, even jobs related to his degree, computer science. He's got the wrong idea that he should be given higher-up positions right from the start because he's him and that's what he deserves. That's the reason he hasn't worked a single day since graduating like a decade ago. Anyway, I've gone to do some deep thinking and reevaluate this friendship because I don't like the person he's becoming. His dad is a bus driver and his mother a retired teacher. They are lovely, humble, down-to-earth people. I think they've done the right thing cutting him off. I know they're both struggling financially, so it's not fair for their son to leech off them. His mother even had to go back to work doing some tutoring in order to make some extra money to be able to support my friend. I'd be so ashamed if I made my 70-year-old mother go back to work just so I could be sitting at home dreaming of landing the perfect job while actively dying to get one. Anyway, I'm rambling, sorry. I'm just so mad. My wife says it's time to cut the cord and distance ourselves from him. I think she might be right. Edit. A yellow star has appeared next to my name. Does this mean I'm the sheriff now? We have reached the end. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to like and subscribe to the channel for more videos like this, and give us your thoughts about the stories in the comments section. Thank you and see you in the next video.